Hey everyone, tonight we are stepping back into a world where the horizon is a line of skyscrapers or flickering streetlights, but a jagged edge of ancient oak and limestone shrouded in a mist, so thick you can almost taste the iron and damp earth. You are standing on a rain-slicked ridge in 4th century Gaul, and the silence is your first mistake. You think you're alone in this primeval wilderness, but then a vibration begins. It's not a sound at first. It's a rhythmic, bone-shaking pulse traveling through the soles of your leather boots. Then comes the scream knot from a human throat. But from the braying of bronze trumpets and the frantic, high-pitched neighing of horses, suddenly the fog tears open, and you see them. A line of twow-heeled engines of war hurtling toward you at a speed that feels impossible for this rugged terrain. The wheels are rimmed in glowing iron, sparking against the flint, and the men standing atop them aren't just soldiers. They are nightmares painted in indigo and gold. Now, let's be honest for a second. You probably wouldn't survive this, while you're busy trying to figure out if your GPS works in the Iron Age. A 6-foot warrior with hair bleached white by lime water would be using your confusion as an opening to introduce you to his spear. It's a fast, brutal, and incredibly loud way to go. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. I'd also love to know where you're listening from tonight, so go ahead and drop your location and your local time in the comments. It's always surreal to think about these ancient stories echoing in modern living rooms across the globe. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. The air around you is heavy, with the scent of wet horsehair and wood smoke. As you stand there, frozen by the sight of the approaching Celtic war party, you realize that everything you thought you knew about primitive warfare is wrong. These aren't the mindless barbarians the later Roman historians would have you believe. As the chariots veer sharply, performing a coordinated sweep that would make a modern drift car driver weep with envy. You see the sheer mechanical genius of the vehicles. They are frighteningly light constructed from supple ash and oak, held together by a combination of sophisticated joinery and heat-shrunk iron. You notice that the floor of the chariot isn't a solid, heavy plank of wood, but a woven mesh of leather thongs. It acts like a primitive suspension system, soaking up the brutal shocks of the uneven ground, so the warrior standing on top doesn't just get launched into the nearest bush the moment they hit a pebble. Historians still argue whether these chariots were a homegrown European invention or an evolution of designs trickling up from the Near East, but standing here watching them bounce effortlessly over a fallen log, the pedigree doesn't matter as much as the performance. This is the weaponization of speed. Before Rome had even figured out how to organize a professional standing army, these Celtic tribes had perfected a mobile elite. You watch the lead charioteer, a man whose face is a mask of swirling blue patterns, lean into a turn. He isn't using a whip. He is communicating with his pair of ponies through subtle shifts in his weight and the tension in his reins. Beside him stands the true warrior, a nobleman draped in a checkered cloak that flutters like a flag in the wind. He isn't sitting down. He's balanced precariously on the narrow front rail, casually juggling 3 javelins as if he's waiting for a bus rather than charging into a bloodbath. It's a bizarre sight to your modern eyes. You're used to the idea of tanks or armored personnel carriers, heavy lumbering things that rely on thick plating. This is the opposite. It's fragile, elegant, and terrifyingly fast. It's a Ferrari made of sticks and spite. You realize that the goal here isn't just to kill the enemy, but to completely unhinge them. The noise is a calculated part of the weapon. Those iron tires aren't just for durability. They create a distinctive metallic rattle clatter that echoes through the valleys, signaling the arrival of the tribes long before you see them. It's the Iron Age version of a psychological operation. You find yourself wondering if they ever had to deal with the ancient equivalent of a check engine light, which I assume was just a druid pointing at a cracked spoke and shaking his head ominously while charging you 3 sheep for the repair. As you watch, the formation begins to circle. This isn't a mindless charge into the center of a crowd. It's a dance. The chariots move in a massive, swirling O shape, drifting close enough to the imaginary enemy line to hurl a javelin, then veering away before a counterattack can be mounted. It's the hit and run perfected centuries before the term existed. You see the warriors shouting insults, their voices carrying over the thunder of the hooves. They are boasting about their lineage, their past victories, and exactly what they plan to do with your head once the sun sets. It's high drama, high-stakes theater. Mainstream history often tells us that the chariot was an obsolete technology by the time the Iron Age hit its stride in Europe, replaced by the more efficient mounted cavalry. But as you watch these machines navigate a literal swamp without sinking, you realize that efficiency is relative. On the soft, broken ground of Gaul and Britain, a horse with a rider on its back might stumble or bog down. A chariot, with its weight distributed across two wide wheels and pulled by two sturdy ponies, skims across the surface. It's a specialized tool for a specialized environment. There, as a quirky bit of lore often whispered by those who study the fringes of this era. Some ancient accounts suggest the Celts believed their chariots were actually powered by the spirits of the wind, and that a truly great charioteer could make his wheels leave the ground entirely without breaking the axle. While physics might have a few things to say about that, looking at the way they catch air over the rise of the hill, you're almost inclined to believe it. The sheer bravado of it all is infectious. You find your own heart rate spiking, the primal fight or flight response screaming at you to run. Even though you know you can't outrun something that moves like this, the warrior on the nearest chariot catches your eye. He doesn't look like a soldier in the way you understand it. There's no uniform, no standardized kit. He's an individual, a walking hoard of wealth and status. His sword hilt is inlaid with red coral, and his torque that heavy gold ring around his neck glows even in the dimming light. To him, this chariot is more than a vehicle. It's his stage. In this society, status is everything. And nothing says status like a custom-built war car and a driver who can keep it steady while you perform feats of athletic insanity. As the sun begins to dip below the tree line, casting long, distorted shadows across the meadow, the chariots begin to slow their frantic pace. The dust starts to settle, coating your tongue with the taste of ancient earth. You realize that this is just the beginning of your journey into the forgotten archives. You aren't just a spectator anymore. You are a witness to a way of life that the civilized world tried its hardest to erase. The Romans would eventually come with their roads and their rigid formations, but for now, the wild, unpredictable energy of the chariot belongs to the mist and the tribes. You take a deep breath, trying to steady your nerves as the last of the iron-shod wheels stop spinning. And the silence of the forest returns heavier and more pregnant with meaning than before. As the dust of that first charge settles, you find yourself drawn toward one of these parked war machines, curious about the skeletal frame that just performed such an impossible display of agility. Up close, the Celtic Chariot, or the essedum, as the Romans would later call, it is a marvel of minimalist engineering. You reach out a hand to touch the side, expecting heavy, iron-plated timber, but instead, your fingers meet a flexible wattlework of bent willow and thin slats of ash. It's light. You realize with a start that two grown men could probably pick this entire vehicle up and carry it over a fallen tree if they had to. This isn't a heavy-duty bronze tank from a pharaoh's tomb. It's a high-performance scout car designed for the treacherous, rain-soaked terrain of Western Europe. You kneel down to inspect the wheels, the most critical part of the entire assembly. These aren't solid chunks of wood. They are sophisticated, multi-part constructions featuring a single piece of ash that has been steamed and bent into a perfect circle of feet of woodworking that requires immense patience and skill. Around this wooden rim is a continuous iron tire. Unlike the multi-part strakes used by other cultures, the Celtic smiths mastered the art of the seamless hoop. They would forge this iron ring to be just a hair smaller than the wheel itself, heat it until it expanded in a glowing orange circle, and then drop it onto the wood before dousing it in cold water. You can almost hear the violent hiss of steam as the iron contracted, biting into the wood with a grip so tight it held the entire wheel together without a single nail. It's a tension-based design that feels more like a modern bicycle wheel than something from 300 BC. The floor beneath your feet, as you tentatively step onto the platform, is that leather mesh you noticed earlier. It's a genius bit of fringe technology, often overlooked in favor of the flashy swords. By weaving thick strips of rawhide across the frame, the Celts created a flexible floor that acted as a shock absorber. Historians still argue whether this design was an intentional piece of ergonomic engineering to prevent chariot leg type of fatigue caused by constant vibrational, simply a way to keep the vehicle as light as possible for transport. Either way, as you bounce slightly on the mesh, you realize you aren't standing on a rigid floor, but on a drum-like surface that gives and takes with the movement of the horses. It's the difference between riding in a wagon and riding on a trampoline. You notice a small, peculiar detail near the axle, a smear of what looks like animal fat mixed with powdered charcoal. It's a primitive but effective lubricant. Without it, the friction of the wooden hub spinning against the axle at high speeds would literally set the chariot on fire. It's a funny thought, the terrifying warrior elite having to pull over because their left wheel is smelling like a burnt brisket, but it highlights the constant maintenance required to keep these machines combat ready. You probably didn't think you'd be worrying about 2,000-year-old grease today, but in this world, a dry axle is a death sentence. The chariot is remarkably low to the ground. This low center of gravity is what allowed the driver you saw earlier to pull those aggressive sliding turns without flipping the whole rig. The wheelbase is wide, significantly wider than the Roman carts that would eventually follow these trails. This was a deliberate choice for stability on the sloping hillsides of the Gallic countryside. Everything about this machine screams specialized. It wasn't built for a paved road. It was built for the mud, the grass, and the chaotic, uneven theater of a tribal border dispute. It's a reminder that primitive is a word we usually use for things we do unfully understand. Looking at the front of the vehicle, you see the tongue, the long wooden pole that extends between the two horses. It's polished smooth, not just from use, but from the warrior's habit of running out onto it during the heat of battle. You see a series of small notches carved into the wood, perhaps a way for the fighter to keep his grip with his bare toes, while the world is a blur of speed and spears. It's an insane way to fight. Imagine standing on the hood of a moving car while trying to throw a javelin at another car moving in the opposite direction. It's extreme sports with a much higher probability of being decapitated. Mainstream archaeology has found remains of these chariots in chariot burials across Yorkshire and parts of France, where the wealthy were buried with their entire vehicles. Interestingly, a quirky tidbit from these digs shows that many chariots were buried with their wheels removed and leaned against the side of the grave. This has led to a fascinating debate. Were they worried the deceased would drive out of the grave and cause trouble? Or was it just a practical way to fit a large vehicle into a small hole? You look at the sleek lines of the one before you and couldn't unhelp but feel that even in the afterlife, a Celtic nobleman would want his wheels within reach. The harness itself is a masterpiece of soft leather and bronze fittings. Unlike the later Roman harnesses, which could sometimes choke a horse if it pulled too hard, the Celtic design utilized a yoke that sat across the horse's shoulders, allowing them to lean their full weight into the pull without restricted breathing. It's an early understanding of equine anatomy that allowed these small northern ponies to move with the power of much larger beasts. You see small bronze bells hanging from the harness, designed to jingle and chime with every movement. It's another layer of the sensory assault, the rattle of the iron, the scream of the carnix, and the constant, high-pitched tinkling of bells. As you stand in the center of the chariot, gripping the side rails, you feel a strange sense of connection to the craftsmen who built this. They didn't have CAD software or hydraulic presses. They had an intimate knowledge of how wood breathes, how iron bites, and how a horse moves. They weaponized the very materials of the forest. The chariot is a bridge between the natural world and the mechanical one, a fragile skeleton of wood and skin that turned a man into a god of speed. You realize that the terror the Romans felt wasn't just about the minute, it was about the machines. To a Roman legionary, used to the slow rhythmic march of infantry, these chariots must have looked like something from another dimension. They didn't stand still long enough to be fought. They were a shimmering, rattling mirage that dealt death and vanished before the dust could settle. You take a final look at the intricate joinery of the chariot before you, noticing how the wood has been polished to a dull glow by the hands of a driver who clearly loved his craft. The light is fading now, and the shadows of the horses are stretching out like dark giants across the clearing. As you step away from the chariot's frame, your attention shifts to the engines that actually make this whole terrifying apparatus work. The horses, but these aren't the towering, majestic stallions you might see in a modern dressage competition or a Hollywood epic. These are the small, sturdy, and incredibly hardy ponies of the northern fringe, standing only about 12 or 13 hands, higher roughly the size of a large modern pony. They look almost adorable until you see the fire in their eyes and the sheer muscle packed into their compact frames. You walk toward a pair tethered nearby, and they track your movement with a wary, intelligent gaze. Their coats are thick and shaggy, designed to shed the constant rain of the Atlantic climate, and their hooves are broad and hard as flint. Mainstream historians often point out that these horses were the ancestors of breeds like the Exmoor or the Dartmoor pony. They were bred for endurance rather than raw size. In the marshy, broken terrain of the Iron Age, a massive, heavy horse would simply sink or snap a leg in a hidden bog hole. These ponies, however, move with a goat-like shoe-footedness. They are the 4x4s of the animal kingdom. You notice that they aren't skittish. They've been desensitized to the deafening rattle of iron tires and the screaming of the carnix since they were to a Celtic warrior, a horse that bolts is a death sentence. So the bond between driver and beast is closer than most human marriages. There is a quirky, almost mythical tidbit that often surfaces in the study of Celtic horsemanship: the whispering traditions. Some ancient sources hint that the Celts used specific low-frequency hums or whistles to command their teams, allowing them to steer without a single tug on the reins. While it sounds like folklore, when you watch the groom nearby lean in and murmur something into the mare's ear, causing her to shift her weight perfectly for the harness, you start to wonder. The bit in the horse's mouth is a work of art, a 3-link snaffle, made of bronze that allows for incredibly precise communication. It doesn't use pain to control the horse. It uses subtle pressure, reflecting a sophisticated understanding of equine psychology that Rome wouldn't match for centuries. Historians still argue whether the Celts practiced selective breeding on a scale that could be called industrial, or if these ponies were simply the natural result of the harsh environment. However, when you look at the uniformity of the pair, matched perfectly for height, gait, and temperament, tips clear this wasn't an accident. They are a matched set, like the pistons in an engine. If one horse pulls harder than the other, the chariot veers. If one tires faster, the whole unit slows. These animals are the heartbeat of the tribe's power, and as you watch the groom rub down their flanks, with a handful of dried fern, you realize they are treated with more care than the lower-ranking humans in the camp. You notice something else as you get closer. The horses are remarkably clean. Despite the mud of the trail, their legs have been washed and their manes are braided with small bronze rings. This isn't just for show. Matted hair can lead to sores under the harness, and a sore horse is a slow horse. There's a practical, cold logic beneath the decorative flair. You imagine the logistics of keeping 1,000 of these animals fed during a campaign. They don't need the expensive grain that a Roman cavalry mount might require. They are easy keepers, capable of surviving on the tough, scrubby grass and gorse of the moors. This gave the Celtic Chariot Corps a massive strategic advantage. They didn't need a massive supply train of fodder to keep moving. There's a funny thought: you probably spend more on your car's annual service than it would have cost to keep these 2 ponies running for a year. Though the oil changes here involve a lot more shoveling. You see a warrior walk up and offer one of the ponies a piece of what looks like dried apple. The horse takes it gently, but then immediately goes back to scanning the horizon. These aren't pets. They are professional athletes with a job to do. They possess a cold-blooded temperament, meaning they stay calm under pressure, which is exactly what you want when you hurtling toward a wall of Roman shields at 30 miles per hour. As the horses shift their weight, the bells on their harnesses chime softly. It's a peaceful sound that belies their violent purpose. You find yourself reaching out to pat the neck of the nearest one, feeling the heat radiating from its skin and the steady, powerful thrum of its heart. This animal is the result of thousands of years of survival in the harshest corners of Europe. It's a survivor, and when paired with the mechanical ingenuity of the chariot, it becomes something more than a pack animal. It becomes a component of a high-speed weapon system. You see a young boy, perhaps no older than 10, leading a fresh pair of ponies toward the river. He moves with a confidence that suggests he was born in a stable. In this culture, your status is tied to your horses. To own a chariot team is to be a person of consequence. To be able to drive them in battle is to be a hero. You realize that the chariot isn't just a vehicle of war. It's an ecological and social ecosystem. It requires the smith to make the iron, the carpenter to steam the wood, the weaver to make the floor, and the breeder to produce the horses. It is the pinnacle of their civilization's technological pyramid. The sun is lower now, turning the shaggy coats of the ponies to a deep, burnt amber. You watch as they are led away to a sheltered enclosure, their breath misting in the cooling air. They move with a synchronized grace, their hooves clicking rhythmically against the stones. Tomorrow, they will be the engine of the storm again. But for now, they are just tired animals looking for a patch of dry ground to sleep on. You take a moment to appreciate the quiet before the next surge of movement. The smell of damp earth and hay lingering in your nostrils as you prepare to follow the warriors deeper into the camp. The camp awakens not to a bugle, but to the sharp, rhythmic crack of a trainer's whip hitting the air. You re-standing at the edge of a flattened meadow that serves as the tribe's proving ground. This is where the magic and the madness happens. You see a young man, barely out of his teens, standing on the tongue of a chariot that is already moving at a brisk trot. He isn't holding on to anything. His arms are spread wide for balance, his knees slightly bent to absorb the vibration of the wooden pole. This is the charioteers' dance, a display of acrobatic prowess that defies every instinct of self-preservation you possess. It's one thing to ride in a vehicle, it's quite another to treat the narrow beam between two galloping horses like a tightrope. As the horses accelerate into a full gallop, the trainer shouts a command. The warrior doesn't just stay on the pole. He runs forward, skips onto the yoke, the wooden bar resting on the horses. Next, and then with a casual grace that makes your stomach flip, he drops back into the cab of the chariot as it swerves. You probably would unsurvive this UD, likely end up as a very expensive speed bump the moment the horses twitched. But for these warriors, this isn't just a stunt, it's a tactical necessity. In the chaos of a real battle, the warrior needs to be able to move to the very front of the vehicle to hurl a spear with maximum leverage, or to jump off, fight on foot, and then leap back onto the moving platform as the driver circles back. Historians still argue whether this specific pole-running maneuver was a common battlefield tactic or a bit of peacocking performed by the most elite champions to demoralize the enemy. Julius Caesar, a man not easily impressed by barbarians, wrote with genuine awe about how the British charioteers could stop their horses at full speed on a steep incline and run out along the pole with total stability. It's a level of core strength and equilibrium that suggests these men spent more time on their chariots than they did on solid ground. You watch the trainee repeat the drill, his face beaded with sweat despite the morning chill. If he slips, the iron-rimmed wheel behind him is unforgiving. There's a quirky fringe theory among some experimental archaeologists that the charioteers used a specific type of resin, or tack, on the soles of their feet to increase friction on the wooden pole. While there's no direct evidence for Iron Age grip tape, when you see the warriors' toes curling around the edges of the ashbeam, you realize that their feet are as much a tool as their hands. They aren't wearing the heavy, clunky boots of a Roman legionary. They are often barefoot or wearing thin second-skin leather moccasins that allow them to feel every tremor of the wood. It's sensory imputeveld, and their brains have been wired since childhood to process it. You notice the driver, the man holding the reins, is just as impressive as the acrobat. He is the brain of the unit. He doesn't just steer, he anticipates. He has to read the terrain 50 yards ahead while also tracking the movement of his partner. There is a silent language between them, a series of taps on the shoulder or shifts in weight that signal a coming turn or a sudden halt. It's a partnership that requires absolute trust. If the driver flinches, the warrior dies. If the warrior misses his mark, the driver is left vulnerable. You see them practicing a crash stop, where the horses are brought to a skidding halt, the chariot fishtailing in the grass. Yet the warrior remains perfectly upright, spear leveled. The physical toll of this training must be immense. You can see the thick cords of muscle in the charioteer's forearms and the way his eyes never stop moving, scanning for obstacles. In a modern context, this is the equivalent of a fighter pilot's situational awareness. They have to know where every other chariot in the squadron is, where the infantry is, and where the nearest boghole is hiding. It's funny to think that we consider ourselves the masters of multitasking because we can listen to a podcast while driving a car with power steering and automatic braking. These men are managing two living, breathing engines and a lethal weapon system simultaneously, all while standing on a piece of woven leather. You watch as the trainer introduces a targeta straw-stuffed effigy tied to a post. The chariot sweeps past at 30 miles per hour. The warrior runs out onto the pole, launches a javelin with a grunt of effort, and hits the enemy square in the chest before the driver has even completed the turn. It's fluid, violent, and incredibly efficient. You realize that the chariot isn't just a transport, it's a force multiplier. It allows a single warrior to strike with the momentum of a galloping horse behind his arm. Mainstream historical records often focus on the charge, But standing here, you see that the retreat is just as choreographed. The driver knows exactly how to angle the chariot so the warrior can keep throwing weapons even as they pull away. It's a 360-degree theater of war. You find yourself wondering how many broken ankles it took to perfect this art form. The ground is littered with the scars of previous practices' deep ruts in the turf, and the occasional shattered piece of a practiced javelin. It's a high-cost, higher-word style of combat that prioritized the individual's skill over the group's formation. As the training session winds down, the warriors are panting, their chests heaving in the damp air. They don't look like the wild men of legend. They look like professional athletes at the end of a grueling scrimmage. They take the time to check the legs of their horses and run their hands over the chariot essedum, looking for the tiny stress fractures that signal a coming break. This attention to detail is what kept them alive. You see a veteran warrior point to a slight wobble in a trainee, S-wheel, and give him a stern lecture that probably translates to fix it or die tomorrow. The sun is finally burning through the mist, illuminating the sweat on the horse's flanks. You take a breath, the smell of churned grass and horse sweat filling your lungs. You've seen the engineering, you've seen the animals, and now you've seen the sheer human grit required to marry the two. The terror that Rome would eventually face wasn't just a result of the Celtic spirit, it was the result of thousands of hours of this drilling, until the movement was as natural as breathing. You follow the warriors back toward the main camp, the rhythmic clack-clack of the practice wheels fading into the background, knowing that the real test is still to come. You leave the training field and follow the sound of a rhythmic, metallic ringing that echoes through the trees like a mechanical heartbeat. As you push past a cluster of hazel bushes, you stumble upon the industrial soul of the tribe, the forge. This isn't just a fire in a hole, it's a sophisticated operation where Iron Age metallurgy reaches its peak. You see a master smith, his skin stained with soot and his muscles nodding as he works a pair of bellows. Before him lies the black gold of the Erie iron, while the rest of the ancient world was often content with bronze or brittle, poorly tempered iron. The Celts were the undisputed masters of the forge. You watch as he pulls a glowing orange bar from the coals, and you realize you are looking at the birth of a chariot tire. The creation of the seamless iron tire is a mainstream historical fact that still leaves modern engineers impressed. Most civilizations at the time would nail separate plates of iron called strakes around a wooden wheel, but the Celts, they wanted more. You watch the smith and his apprentices take a long bar of iron, hammer it into a flat ribbon, and then, in a display of incredible precision, weld the ends together to form a perfect, continuous hoop. There are no bolts, no nails, and no seams to catch on the rock. This single hoop is the skeleton that keeps the wooden wheel from shattering under the immense centrifugal force of a high-speed turn. It's a level of craftsmanship that requires an intimate understanding of temperature and carbon content. But the real magic happens during the shrinking process. You watch as a group of men brings over a freshly carved ash wheel. The iron tire is heated in a circular fire until it glows a dull red, expanding just enough to be slipped over the wooden rim. With a series of frantic, coordinated movements, they drop the hot iron onto the wood. Immediately, they douse it with buckets of cold water. A massive cloud of steam erupts, hissed out like a dying dragon, and you hear the wood groan. As the iron cools, it contracts with thousands of pounds of pressure. Biting into the ash and pulling the spokes tight into the hub, it's a tension-based system that makes the wheel incredibly strong yet flexible. Historians still argue whether the Celts invented this heat shrink method independently or if it was a closely guarded secret, passed down through a trans-European guild of smiths. There is a quirky, fringe tidbit regarding these smiths. Many ancient Celtic myths suggest that blacksmiths were essentially sorcerers, capable of singing the impurities out of the metal. While that might sound like a nice bit of folklore, modern analysis of their iron shows they were inadvertently case-hardening their tools, essentially turning the outer layer of iron into heat-carbon steel through constant contact with charcoal. To an observer, 2,500 years ago, watching a man turn a dull rock into a singing blade or a shimmering tire, it probably did look like magic. You see the smith tap the finished wheel with a small hammer. It rings with a clear, high-pitched note, a sign that the tension is perfect. As you look around the forge, you see stacks of other components: bronze linchpins shaped like stylized boars, iron bits for the horses, and massive cauldrons waiting for repair. This is where the terror is manufactured. The Romans would later claim that the Celts were unorganized. But looking at the specialized tools, the tongs, the curved anvils, the precision files, you see a highly organized military-industrial complex. You probably spend more time trying to assemble a flat-pack shelf than these men spent building a vehicle that could withstand a literal war. They aren't just making wheels, they are making high-speed survival gear. You notice a pile of bog iron in the corner, lumps of mineric soil harvested from the local marshes. It's a reminder of how deeply connected this technology is to the land. They didn't have to mine deep into the earth. They harvested their iron from the very swamps they defended. This gave them a level of self-sufficiency that made them incredibly hard to conquer. You can destroy a city, but it's much harder to destroy 1,000 tiny hidden forges scattered throughout the deep woods. The smith catches you staring and grunts, gesturing for you to move back as he begins the delicate process of casting a bronze hubcap. The heat in the forge is oppressive, smelling of sulfur and burnt wood. You find yourself fascinated by the linchpins, the small pegs that keep the wheel from sliding off the axle. Even these are decorated with intricate, swirling Latin art. It's a reminder that for the Celts, there was no distinction between functional and beautiful. A chariot that killed you should also look good while doing it. It's a philosophy that prioritizes the spirit of the object. You watch an apprentice polishing the bronze until it shines like gold, reflecting the flickering orange light of the forge. It's a funny thought. Really you standing in a world where high-tech means a well-tempered piece of iron and a perfectly steamed piece of wood. But as you watch the apprentices roll the finished wheel across the dirt, it moves with a terrifyingly smooth, heavy momentum. It's a reminder that we haven't actually changed that much. We're still just trying to find better ways to move faster and hit harder. The smith finally wipes his brow with a leather-clad forearm, his eyes flickering toward the finished tires. He knows that his work is the only thing standing between a warrior and a catastrophic mechanical failure at 40 miles per hour. As the evening light begins to filter through the smoke of the forge, you see the completed wheels being rolled toward the assembly area. They catch the fading sun, the iron rims dark and menacing against the light wood. You take a step back, the heat of the fire still tingling on your skin, and realize that the chariot is more than the sum of its parts. It is a masterpiece of material science, a bridge between the raw elements of the earth and the lethal ambitions of the tribes. You follow the wheels, the metallic clink of the iron against stone, serving as a reminder that the storm is being built, one hammer blow at a time. You move from the intense heat of the forge toward the center of the camp, where the air is filled with a sharp, medicinal scent. It's a smell you can't quite place, something like fermented cabbage mixed with crushed herbs. Then you see it. A group of warriors sitting around a large ceramic vat, dipping their hands into a thick, dark blue paste. This is woad, a dye extracted from the Isidis tinctoria plant, and it is the primary ingredient in the Celtic warrior's psychological arsenal. You watch as a veteran fighter uses a bone stylus to trace intricate, swirling patterns across his chest and arms. This isn't just body art, it is a declaration of war. By the time they are finished, they look less like men and more like statues carved from lapis lazuli. Their skin, a canvas of jagged lines and interlocking spirals. Mainstream historical fact confirms that the Celts used woad to stain their skin. But the exact method remains a point of intense scholarly interest. Some believe the dye was tattooed into the skin, while others, supported by the writings of Julius Caesar, suggest it was a temporary paint applied before battle. Caesar famously noted that the Britons dyed themselves with woad to give them a more terrible appearance in fight. As you watch the warriors work, you realize that the blue color serves a dual purpose. In the dim, misty light of a northern European morning, a man painted blue becomes a ghost. The color breaks up the human silhouette, making it incredibly difficult for an enemy to track their movement or judge the distance of an incoming spear throw. Fringe bit of chemistry often discussed by experimental archaeologists, woad is a natural astringent and antiseptic. If you going into a battle where you likely to be grazed by a blade or pelted with debris having your skin already coated in a substance that helps clot blood and prevent infection, is a massive tactical advantage. It's essentially the Iron Age equivalent of a healing factor. You probably wouldn't survive the application process though. Raw woad paste is notoriously pungent and can be quite irritating to the skin. It's a beauty is pain situation, except the beauty is designed to make a Roman legionary wet his sandals in terror. Historians still argue whether these patterns were unique to each individual, or if they represented specific tribal affiliations. Some scholars suggest the swirls are maps of the stars, or representations of the spirit paths the warrior hoped to travel if they fell in combat. Looking at the complexity of the designs, it's clear they aren't random. They follow the same Latin aesthetic you saw in the chariot. Esperans fittingza, visual language of constant motion and transformation. In the chaos of a chariot charge, these patterns would appear to shimmer and dance, creating a strobe-like effect that would make it almost impossible for an infantryman to fix his gaze on a single target. You notice one warrior who is particularly meticulous. He isn't just painting his skin, he's spiking his hair with lime water. As the lime dries, it turns his hair into thick, white, needle-like protrusions that stand out from his head like a mane. It makes him look taller, fiercer, and undeniably less than human. It's a deliberate rejection of the civilized look. To the Romans, who prized short hair and clean-shaven faces, this was the ultimate visual provocation. It's funny to think that 2,000 years later, we pay people hundreds of dollars to give us edgy hairstyles. While these guys were doing it with a bucket of limestone runoff and a dream of decapitation, the psychological impact of the blue paint cannot be overstated. Imagine standing in a rigid, disciplined line, your shield heavy in your hand, watching 100 blue-skinned giants hurtling toward you on iron-rimmed chariots. They are screaming, their blue skin clashing violently with the green of the forest, their white hair flashing in the sun. It's an assault on the senses designed to bypass the logical brain and trigger a primal flight response. The Celts knew that a battle is won in the mind long before the first sword is drawn. They weaponize their very appearance, turning their bodies into a part of the chariot's toroidal livery system. You see a younger warrior struggling to reach a spot on his back, and his comrade steps in to help. Despite the terrifying appearance they are cultivating, there is a sense of brotherhood here. This ritual of painting is a bonding experience, transitioned from the mundane world of the farmer to the sacred world of the warrior. They are shedding their humanity and putting on the mantle of the predator. You find yourself wondering what it feels like to have that cold paste drying on your skin, the tightening sensation reminding you with every breath that today might be the day you enter the legends. It's a bizarre contrast to the engineering you saw earlier. The chariot is a masterpiece of logic and physics, while the woad is a masterpiece of myth and emotion, yet they are inseparable. One provides the speed, the other provides the soul. Without the blue paint, the chariot is just a cart. Without the chariot, the blue warrior is just a man in a forest. Together, they form a cohesive unit of Iron Age shock and awe. You watch as the veteran warrior stands up, the woad now dry and matte on his skin, looking like a fragment of the midnight sky brought down to earth. As the camp prepares for the coming night, the blue-painted warriors begin to gather around the central fires. The flickering orange light catches the blue patterns, making them seem to pulse with a life of their own. You take a step back into the shadows, feeling like an intruder in a holy place. The forgotten archives aren't just about the objects left behind in the soil. They are about the psychology of a people who refuse to be forgotten. Tomorrow, these blue ghosts will mount their wooden engines and scream into the face of history, and you'll be there to see the first clash. The evening air thickens with the smell of roasting venison and the sharp tang of ale, but the atmosphere isn't one of simple relaxation. You are witnessing the social hierarchy of the heroic age in its rawest form. In this society, the chariot isn't just a military asset. It is the physical manifestation of the Galloglass ancestry, the elite warrior class whose lineage is as long as their swords. You watch as a champion, his woad-stained skin now shimmering in the firelight, recounts his genealogy to a circle of younger men. To these people, who you are depends entirely on who your father was and how many heads he took in the previous season. The chariot is a mobile stage for this ego, a way to elevate the hero, literally and figuratively, above the common infantry who must trudge through the mud on foot. Mainstream history highlights this heroic style of combat as a precursor to the chivalry of the Middle Ages. Unlike the Roman model, where a soldier is a nameless cog in a massive machine, the Celtic warrior is an individual superstar. You see this play out as two warriors begin a ritualized verbal spat over a perceived slight. This isn't just brawling, it's a high-stakes duel of reputations. Often, these disputes are settled by chariot duels of practice, where two noblemen would ride out between the opposing armies to engage in single combat. It's a specialized theatrical form of violence designed to settle disputes without the need for a full-scale massacre. The chariot provides the speed for the approach and the height for the strike, turning a one-on-one fight into a high-speed joust. There is a quirky fringe theory that suggests these chariot warriors practiced a form of ritualized trophy hunting that involved the wheels themselves. Some archaeologists have found chariot burials where the spokes were carved with notches that don't seem to serve any mechanical purpose. The fringe idea: each notch represented a defeated opponent's chariot that had been disabled or captured. While most historians lean toward these being simple decorative marks, when you see a warrior lovingly running his thumb over a series of deep grooves on his chariot as citadel, you can help but feel you re-looking at a primitive kill count or a scoreboard for the Iron Age's most dangerous game. Historians still argue whether the transition from chariots to mounted cavalry was driven by a change in horse breeding producing larger animals, capable of carrying a man, or a shift in social philosophy. Some believe the heroic individual combat style became a liability as tribal warfare grew more frequent and required larger, more disciplined units. But here, in the heart of the tribe, that shift hasn't happened yet. The man on the chariot is still the king of the battlefield. You watch as a young squire polishes a long leaf-shaped sword, his eyes fixed on the champion. The squire isn't just a servant. He is an apprentice, learning the heroic code, a set of unwritten rules that dictate how a man should live, fight, and most importantly, how he should die to ensure his name lives on in song. It's a funny thing to realize you probably worry about your social media engagement or your credit score, while these men are obsessing over whether a bard will remember their name 3 generations from now. Their legacy is their only insurance policy. You see a warrior stand up and gesture toward his chariot, his voice booming as he describes a raid from 3 summers ago. He isn't just telling a story, he's justifying his place at the fire and his share of the loot. In this world, if you don't brag, you don't exist. It's an exhausting way to live, a constant performance of masculinity and martial skill, where one slip-up on the chariot pole could turn you from a legend into a cautionary tale. The social structure is reinforced by the champion's portion, the finest cut of meat from the communal pot reserved for the greatest warrior present. You watch the tension rise as the meat is carved. Hands shift toward sword hilts, eyes narrow. This is the deadly politics of the elite. If a warrior feels he has been passed over for a lesser man, he might challenge him right there, turning the feast into a funeral. The chariot is often used as a bargaining chip in these negotiations. A high-ranking lord might gift a beautifully crafted wheel or a matched pair of ponies to a subordinate to ensure his loyalty. It's a gift economy where status is constantly bought, sold, and defended. You notice a group of older men, their bodies a map of scars and faded blue paint. Watching the younger generation with a mix of pride and cynicism, they are the survivors of the heroic age, men who have outlived their peers in a profession with a terrifyingly high turnover rate. They know that the chariot is a fickle mistress. One broken axle or one panicked horse can end a lineage in a heartbeat. They speak in low tones about the old ways, perhaps sensing that the world is changing, that the disciplined shadows of the Mediterranean are slowly creeping toward their forests. But for tonight, the fire is hot, the ale is flowing, and the chariot is still the symbol of ultimate power. As the bard begins to pluck at a lyre, his voice rising in a haunting melody that tells of ancient kings and golden wheels, you feel the weight of this culture's history. These aren't just barbarians. They are a people obsessed with the intersection of art, ancestry, and violence. The chariot is the needle that threads those things together. You look at the dark silhouettes of the parked vehicles at the edge of the firelight, their tall frames looking like skeletal sentinels. They are more than wood and iron. They are the vaults where the tribe's glory is stored. The moon rises over the hillfort, casting a pale silver light across the valley. You find yourself leaning back against a wooden post, the rhythm of the feast slowing down as the warriors settle into their furs. The Galaglass spirit is thick in the era mixture of fatalism and fierce pride. You realize that to understand the Celtic Chariot, you have to understand the man who stands upon it. He isn't fighting for a country or a flag, he's fighting for a song. You close your eyes for a moment, the sound of the lyre blending with the distant, low nickering of the horses, knowing that when the sun rises, the dance of the heroes will begin again in earnest. The deep sleep of the camp is shattered not by a scream, but by a sound that defies nature, vibrating metallic roar that seems to rise from the belly of the earth itself. You bolt upright, your heart hammering against your ribs, and look toward the ridge. Standing against the gray light of dawn is a warrior holding a This is no ordinary trumpet. It is a bronze vertical horn, over 6 feet tall, topped with the gaping, belligerent head of a wild boar. As the warrior draws a breath and blows, the bronze tongue inside the boar's mouth vibrates, creating a haunting, discordant shriek that echoes through the valley. This is the voice of the Celtic war machine, a psychological weapon designed to liquefy the resolve of any soldier who values his sanity. Mainstream archaeological finds, such as the Deskford Carnix or the spectacular hoard discovered at Tintignac, reveal the sheer acoustic genius of these instruments. They weren't just for signaling, they were designed for maximum sonic terror. The Carnix is tall so that its sound can travel over the heads of the infantry, carrying the scream of the tribe across the entire battlefield. When dozens of these are played simultaneously alongside the rattling of chariot wheels, the resulting wall of sound is less like music and more like a physical force. It's an Iron Age sonic boom. You can see the effect it has on the horses. They don't spook, but rather lean into the noise, their eyes wide and nostrils flaring, as if the sound is a chemical stimulant pumping through their veins. There is a quirky fringe debate among musicologists and historians regarding the internal mechanics of the Carnix. Some believe that the bronze head contained small loose pellets or specialized reeds that allowed the instrument to produce 2 notes at once, a multiphonic effect that would sound alien and supernatural to ears used to the simple wooden flutes of the Mediterranean. Imagine standing in a disciplined Roman line, expecting the familiar, orderly sound of a tuba, and instead being hit by a chorus of metallic demons that sound like they read tearing the sky apart. It's the ultimate disruption of the enemy's mental frequency. You probably wouldn't survive the sheer sensory overload. It's like being at the front row of a heavy metal concert where the band is trying to actually kill you. Historians still argue whether the Carnix was used to relay specific tactical commands, like a complex Morse code of the forest door, if it was purely a tool of intimidation. Looking at the way the charioteers respond to the changes in pitch, it seems likely to be a bit of both. A long, sustained low note might signal the slow advance, while a series of sharp, rhythmic barks sends the workhorse into their famous high-speed swirl. The Carnix player is a vital part of the chariot unit, often riding in a specialized vehicle or standing on a nearby prominence to act as the conductor of the chaos. He is a high-value target, yet his instrument is so tall it's impossible to hide. You watch as the Carnix player lowers the horn, the boar's head dipping as if it's finished its meal. The silence that follows is almost worse than the noise. Your ears are ringing, a high-pitched whine that makes the world feel distant and unreal. This is the calm before the iron hits the dirt. The warriors around you are transformed by the sound. The languor of the feast is gone, replaced by a twitchy, predatory energy. They are checking their harness straps one last time, their movements sharp and economical. The Carnix hasn't just signaled the start of the day, it has synchronized their heartbeats. It's a fascinating piece of engineering when you think about it, the transition from a simple animal horn to a multi-part cast bronze vertical trumpet. It shows a society that isn't just surviving, but one that has the leisure time to innovate in the realm of acoustics. They didn't just want to win, they wanted to be heard. They wanted the very air to vibrate with their presence. You see a craftsman nearby polishing the bronze ears of a Carnix, ensuring they catch the light just as the sound catches the ear. It's a total sensory commitment to the art of war. You notice that the boar's eyes on the instrument are made of red glass or enamel, designed to glitter in the sun. It's another small, terrifying detail. To the Celts, the boar was a symbol of relentless, stubborn courage, an animal that doesn't know how to retreat. By topping their war horns with its image, they were invoking that spirit. As the sun finally crests the ridge, the Carnix player raises the horn again. This time, the sound is joined by the rhythmic beating of spears against shields, a percussive undercurrent to the bronze scream. It's funny to think about modern warfare: silent drones, encrypted satellite pings, suppressed rifles. We've moved toward the invisible and the quiet. But the Celts, they were the loudest people on the planet. They wanted you to know exactly who was coming for you, exactly how fast they were moving, and exactly how much they were enjoying it. The Carnix is the ultimate expression of that bravado. It's a middle finger made of bronze, pointed straight at the concept of civilized silence. The chariots begin to pull out of their parking spots, the iron tires crunching over the frost-covered grass. The Carnac player takes his place near the front of the column, the boar's head swaying with his gait. You follow behind, the vibration of the horns still humming in the marrow of your bones. The forest, which seemed so ancient and indifferent yesterday, now feels like an echo chamber for the tribe's ambition. You realize that the forgotten archives aren't just silent artifacts in a museum case. They are the remnants of a world that was once incredibly, deafeningly loud. As the column moves toward the valley floor, the Carnac lets out one final, defiant blast that shakes the leaves from the trees. You feel a strange shiver of excitement and dread. The stage is set, the music has begun, and the masters of speed are ready to show the world why the chariot still reigns supreme in the wild places. You take a deep breath of the cold, metallic air and step forward into the thunder. As the war party halts near a clearing to finalize the day's maneuvers, the intensity of the morning ritual gives way to one last communal acto-meal that is less about nutrition and more about the volatile chemistry of warrior status. You find yourself sitting on a mossy log near the central fire of the vanguard, watching a massive bronze cauldron simmer. The scent is overpowering: fatty pork, wild leeks, and a sharp fermented tang of northern mead. But don't let the rustic setting fool you. This is a legal minefield. In the heroic age, how you eat is how you are ranked. You watch as the chieftain's carver, a man with a steady hand and a very long knife, approaches the meat. This is the moment of the champion's portion, and the air is so thick with tension you could cut it with a dull spear. Mainstream historical records, particularly those echoing the observations of the Greek ethnography Posidonius, describe these feasts as the primary staging ground for Celtic political life. The champion's portion, the choicest cut of the hindquarter, is reserved for the greatest warrior in the room. You see a scarred veteran, a man whose chariot is famous for having outrun a Roman scouting party near the Rhine, keep his hand resting casually on the hilt of his leaf-shaped sword as the carver moves. If a younger, bolder warrior feels his deeds this season have surpassed the veterans, he is legally and socially obligated to challenge for that piece of meat. It sounds like a rowdy dinner party, but these disputes often end in blood on the grass before the first course is finished. There is a quirky fringe detail often found in the margins of Irish and Gallic mythology regarding the magic of the cauldron. Some tales suggest that these vessels were never failing, and that a true hero's cauldron would refuse to cook meat for a coward. While that's likely a poetic metaphor for social exclusion, you notice the warriors looking at the pot with a genuine, superstitious reverence. They believe the food carries the strength of the tribe's ancestors. You probably wouldn't survive this meal not because of the combat, but because the sheer amount of hypertene self-IV meat washed down with unwatered wine would likely give your modern digestive system a permanent blue screen error. It's a diet designed for men who expect to burn 6,000 calories a day running out on chariot poles. Historians still argue whether these feasts were purely internal tribal affairs or if they served as a neutral ground for rival clans to negotiate through a display of competitive generosity. You see a visitor from a neighboring tribe sitting across the fire. He is being served with exaggerated politeness, but his eyes are constantly scanning the chariots parked at the perimeter. This is the Iron Age version of a high-stakes corporate gala. Every gift given, every piece of meat shared, and every boast yelled over the crackle of the flames is a calculated move in a game of power. The chariot warriors are the shareholders of this society, and the feast is their annual board meeting. You notice the seating arrangement is a perfect circle, yet there is a definite top and bottom. The charioteers, the driver, sits slightly behind the warriors they serve, creating a physical map of the hierarchy. Despite their lower social standing, the drivers are given a special fermented brew made from heather and honey, a drink said to sharpen the eyes and steady the nerves. It's a funny thought, the elite fighter pilots of the tribe have their own specialized pre-flight fuel. You watch a driver take a long pull from a horn, his eyes never leaving the horses tethered nearby. Even while eating, the bond between the man and the machine is never truly broken. The conversation is a deafening roar of remember when and just you wait. They talk about the quality of the iron in the latest batch of tires and the temper of the new swords coming out of the southern forges. It's a technical jargon that would sound familiar to any modern car enthusiast, just replaced with talk of axle grease, made from bear fat and the best way to steam bend an ash rim. You realize that these men aren't just thugs, they are specialists, They are the 1% of their world, a professional warrior class supported by the labor of thousands of farmers and smiths. Their sole job is to be faster and more terrifying than anyone else. As the meal concludes, the carver finally presents the hindquarter to the veteran. For a heartbeat, the camp goes silent. A young warrior, his face a fresh mask of woad, half-rises from his seat, his knuckles white on his dagger. The veteran simply stares at him, a cold, flat look that says more than 1,000 screams. The young man slowly sinks back down. The challenge is declined for today. The social order holds, and the energy in the camp shifts from the tension of the feast back to the tension of the hunt. You feel the collective breath of the tribe release as the veteran takes his portion and begins to eat with a slow, deliberate grace. It's a bizarrely ritualized way to live. Everything is a test. Everything is a performance. You see a squire bringing a bowl of water for the champion to wash his hands. The bronze bowl decorated with the same swirling patterns as the chariot's hubcaps. In this world, there is no such thing as a simple object. The art is everywhere, a constant reminder of the tribe's identity and its connection to the divine. The feast wasn't just about food, it was about reaffirming the heroic code that keeps this chaotic group of individuals functioning as a single lethal unit. The fire is dying down now, leaving a bed of glowing red coals that mimic the iron tires in the forge. You stand up, feeling the weight of the meat and the intensity of the atmosphere. The sun is now high enough to burn off the last of the valley mist, revealing the path ahead. The warriors are standing, wiping grease from their chins and reaching for their helmets. The time for boasting is over. The champion's portion has been claimed, the hierarchy is set, and the engines of war are ready to move. You follow the clank of bronze and the rattle of wood as the tribe begins to filter out toward the battle line. The transition from the feast to the fray is instantaneous. You are no longer watching a group of men eating. You are watching a well-oiled machine engage its gears. As the chariots reach a wide, flat expanse of hard-packed earth, the warriors begin to demonstrate the maneuver that would eventually haunt the memoirs of Roman generals, the tactical leap. You see a chariot hit a terrifying speed, the pony's hooves drumming a frantic rhythm. Suddenly, the warrior, who had been standing in the cab vaults, onto the wooden pole between the horses. He doesn't just stand there, he runs. He sprints down the narrow beam of ash while the world is moving at 30 miles per hour, balances on the yoke directly behind the horses' tossing heads, and hurls a javelin with the full momentum of the vehicle behind his arm. Mainstream history records this specific feat with a mixture of disbelief and respect. Julius Caesar, in his commentaries on the Gallic War, describes the British charioteers as having reached such a level of proficiency that they could run along the pole, stand on the yoke, and retreat with the greatest speed into the chariot again. To a Roman soldier, trained in the slow, grinding discipline of the phalanx or the maniple, this looked like supernatural acrobatics. It transformed the chariot from a mere transport into a dynamic, multi-level firing platform. By moving to the very front of the vehicle, the warrior extends his range and gains a downward angle on his target, making his heavy, iron-tipped spears almost impossible to parry. There is a quirky fringe debate among sports kinesiologists who have tried to replicate this movement. They suggest the bounce of the leather mesh floor we discussed earlier was actually the secret to the leap. The warrior would use the natural spring of the floor to launch himself onto the pole, effectively using the chariot like a diving board. While you probably would, and survive, the attempt you'd likely trip on your own laces and become a permanent part of the local geology, the Celtic warriors lived for this. It was the ultimate flex. Imagine the psychological impact. You're a tired infantryman, and you see a blue-painted giant literally running toward you through the air, balanced on a stick of wood, screaming his lineage at the top of his lungs. Historians still argue whether this maneuver was sustainable in a long engagement or if it was a only-end opening move designed to shatter a line. Watching it now, you see the warrior retreat just as quickly as he advanced. He uses the reins, which the driver holds high, as a kind of handrail to whip himself back into the safety of the cab. This allows the chariot to veer away, creating a safe distance while the warrior grabs another spear from the rack. It is a cycle of violence that repeats every few seconds. The chariot never stops. It just pulses in and out of the danger zone, a mechanical heartbeat of iron and wood. You notice the driver is leaning back, his heels dug into the edge of the woven floor, providing a counterweight to the warrior's forward momentum. This is the hidden part of the leap. If the driver doesn't compensate for the shift in weight, the chariot's nose would dip, the pole would snap, or the horses would stumble. It is a synchronized, gravity-defying act. It's funny to think that we consider Drivarasis technology a modern luxury. But these charioteers were performing real-time physics calculations with their own bodies. They were the original stability control systems. The speed is dizzying. From your vantage point, the wheels are a blur of bronze and iron, and the dust kicked up by the ponies creates a localized storm. You see a warrior miss his targeta, wouldn't practice shield end. He doesn't curse or slow down. He simply laughs, skips back into the cab, and prepares for the next pass. There is a joyful element to this destruction that is deeply unsettling. They aren't just fighting. They are playing a game with the highest possible stakes. You realize that the terror of the chariot wasn't just the iron tires or the blue paint. It was the fact that the men on them seemed to be having the time of their lives while killing you. You find yourself wondering about the failures? There must have been thousands of broken collarbones and shattered ankles in the history of the tribes. But in the forgotten archives, we only see the perfection. We see the result of a culture that prioritized this specific, insane skill above almost all others. You see a young squire watching the veterans leap with wide eyes, his fingers twitching as he mimics the movement. He's practicing the muscle memory. In a world without books, your body is the only archive that matters. As the chariots continue their high-speed drills, you notice how the tactical leap allows them to navigate around obstacles. If a fallen tree or a dead horse blocks the path, the warrior can leap off, move the obstacle, or engage the enemy, and then leap back onto the moving vehicle as the driver circles. It gives the unit a level of infantry cavalry fluidity that Rome wouldn't match until the late Empire. It's a hybrid style of warfare, the special ops of the Iron Age. The sun is now beating down on the training field, turning the churned-up dust into a golden haze. The smell of horse sweat and hot iron is thick in the air. You take a breath, feeling the vibration of the passing wheels in your own chest. The leap is more than a trick. It is a statement of absolute confidence. It says to the enemy, "I am so much better at this than you that I can dance while I kill you." You follow the chariots as they begin to form a single, terrifying line, the dance coming to an end as the real hunt begins. The open fields of the training ground vanish as you follow the war party into the true heart of the Celtic landscape, the deep, ancient canopy of the European forest. This isn't the manicured woodland you might stroll through today. It is a claustrophobic maze of oak, ash, and hawthorn, where the ground is a treacherous patchwork of moss-covered roots and hidden sinkholes. You expect the chariots to slow down, to perhaps become an encumbrance in such a tight space. Instead, you witness the weaponization of terrain. The drivers don't fight the forest. They use it as an extension of their own armor. You see a chariot bank sharply around a massive trunk, its iron tire missing the bark by a fraction of an inch before disappearing into a thicket of ferns. Mainstream historical analysis often highlights how the Celts utilized guerrilla tactics long before the term was coined. They didn't seek the open, flat battlefields that the Roman legions craved for their rigid formations. Instead, they baited their enemies into these broken lands. You watch as a scout signals from a high branch, and the entire chariot line simply vanishes. They pull into pre-cut chutes in the undergrowth hidden tracks, known only to the locals, where the chariots are swallowed by the shadows. To a pursuing enemy, it's as if the earth opened up and ate 100 horses. This ability to disengage and reappear at a different flank is what made them ghosts in the eyes of the Mediterranean invaders. There is a quirky fringe theory that the Celts actually landscaped their territories for war, subtly pruning trees and hardening specific bog tracks over decades to create high-speed corridors that only a chariot of a certain width could navigate. It's the Iron Age version of a smart defense system. If you didn't know the exact pressure points of the marsh, your heavy wagon or armored cavalry would sink to the axles, while the lightweight mesh-floored Celtic chariot would skim across the surface like a water strider. You probably wouldn't survive a hike through here, let alone a chase. One wrong step into a quaking bog and you reap part of the peat for the next 2 millennia. Historians still argue whether the Celts possessed sophisticated cartographic knowledge or if their navigation was entirely intuitive and oral. Watching the lead driver, you see him navigate by the specific tilt of a branch or the color of the moss on a stone. It is a biological GPS. In this environment, the professional soldier of Rome is a fish out of water. The Roman strength lay in the line, the square, and the clear view. The Celtic strength lay in the curve, the shadow, and the ambush. You see the charioteers practicing a pincer maneuver, where two chariots split around a dense thicket and reunite on the other side with terrifying synchronization, catching an imaginary foe in a crossfire of javelins. The forest also provides a natural acoustic dampener. While the carnix can scream across an open valley in the dense woods, the sound is muffled and distorted. The Celts used this to confuse the enemy's sense of direction. They would station carnix players at different points in the woods, blowing at staggered intervals. To a Roman soldier trapped in the green twilight, it would sound like he was being surrounded by 1,000 invisible giants. You notice the warriors have stopped shouting. They move with a silent, predatory grace, the only sound being the soft, rhythmic thud-thud of hooves on damp earth. It's a funny thought, imagining a Roman surveyor trying to make sense of this place. They wanted to draw straight lines and build paved roads that ignored the mood of the land. The Celts, however, respected the mood. They understood that a hill isn't just an obstacle. It's a high ground advantage. A river isn't just a border. It's a bottleneck. You see a driver test the depth of a stream with a long pole before signaling the rest to cross. They know exactly where the firm gravel gives way to deadly silt. They are the ultimate local knowledge experts, and they use that knowledge to turn the environment into a lethal ally. You find yourself ducking as a low-hanging branch sweeps past your head. The speed within the forest feels twice as fast as it did in the open. The flickering, light-dappled sunlight breaking through the leaves creates a strobe effect that makes it hard to track the moving wheels. This is a deliberate part of their camouflage. The swirling woad patterns on the warrior's skin mimic the chaotic shadows of the forest floor, making them nearly invisible until they are within striking distance. It's an early form of disruptive coloration, camouflage, and it's incredibly effective. As the sun moves higher, the humidity in the forest rises, bringing out the smell of decaying leaves and wild garlic. You see the warriors stop at a sacred grova place, where the trees are draped with the bones of previous kills and bronze offerings. Even here, in the middle of a tactical exercise, they pay their respects. To them, the terrain isn't just stuff, it's inhabited by spirits that need to be appeased. A charioteer might toss a small bronze ring into a spring as he passes, a toll for safe passage. You realize that their mastery of the land isn't just physical, it's spiritual. The column finally emerges into a small hidden meadow, the secret base of the tribe's vanguard. The warriors dismount, their faces flushed with the adrenaline of the forest run. They check the horses for brush burn and clear the mud from the chariot's axles. You take a moment to look back at the wall of green you just exited. It looks impenetrable, a fortress of wood and leaf. But you know better now. You know that for the masters of the chariot, that forest is a highway, a shield, and a weapon, all in one. You follow them as they begin to set up a perimeter, the ghosts of the woods finally standing still in the sun. As the vanguard settles into the hidden meadow, the predatory energy of the warriors is suddenly dampened by the arrival of several figures draped in long, undyed white robes. They move with a slow, deliberate gravity that makes even the most boastful champion fall silent. These are the Druids. While mainstream history often traps them in the caricature of wizards or priests, you are looking at the tribe's supreme judicial and scientific authority. They aren't just here to pray, they are here to ensure the physics of the chariot aligned with the favor of the gods. You watch as a druid approaches a line of war cars, holding a branch of rohan dipped in spring water. He isn't just blessing the axles, he's inspecting the spirit of the wood, looking for the invisible flaws that a common smith might miss. Mainstream historical records, largely from the observations of the Roman writer Lucan, suggest that the Druids held a terrifying amount of power over the warrior class. They could stop a battle mid-charge simply by walking between the opposing lines. Here, you see them performing the sovereignty of the wheel ritual. They believe the chariot's circular wheel represents the cycle of life, death, and rebirth. By blessing the hub, they are metaphorically centering the warrior's soul. It's a sophisticated layer of psychological conditioning. A warrior who believes his chariot is divinely protected will drive with a level of reckless abandon that a rational soldier simply cannot match. You probably would unsurvive the Druidic interviews. They were known to memorize thousands of verses of law and lore. And failing a ritualized question could result in you being declared socially dead, a fate worse than a spear to the gut. There is a quirky fringe theory that the Druids were actually the chief engineers of the Celtic world. possessing a secret mathematical language used to calculate the precise curvature needed for the heat trunk tires we saw at the forge. Some researchers point to the complex geometry of Celtic jewelry as proof of a high-level understanding of pi and golden ratios, while historians still argue whether this was formal mathematics or just an incredible eye for design. When you see a druid using a simple knotted cord to check the alignment of a chariot S-axle, you realize there is a deep hidden logic at work. They aren't just mystics, they are the keepers of the tribe's intellectual property. You notice the warriors looking at the druids with a mixture of awe and genuine fear. In this world, the druid is the only one who can talk back to a chieftain without losing his head. They manage the calendars, deciding which days are dark, unlucky for travel, and which are bright for war. You see a druid leaning close to a charioteer, whispering a series of rhythmic incantations. It's a form of mantra designed to focus the driver's mind and block out the distractions of the battlefield. It's funny to think about modern performance coaches and sports psychologists. The Celts had them 2,000 years ago. They just wore more linen and occasionally sacrificed a bull to get the point across. Historians still argue about the extent of druidic involvement in actual combat. While most believe they stayed in the rear to observe and record the deeds of the heroes, some fringe interpretations of the Battle of Mona suggest they stood on the shoreline screaming curses and waving brands to create a wall of terror that physically paralyzed the Roman invaders. You see a younger druid in training gathering herbs near the horses. He isn't looking for magic spells. He's looking for arnica and willow bark natural painkillers and anti-inflammatories. They are the medics of the chariot corps, possessing a botanical knowledge that would make a modern pharmacist take notes. The ritual ends with the druids marking each chariot with a small red symbol in ochre. It's a mark of passage, signaling that the machine is now a sacred vessel of the tribe's will. You see a warrior touch the mark and then touch his own forehead, a gesture of shared destiny. The chariot is no longer just a vehicle of wood and iron. It is a sanctified weapon. The druids then retreat to the edge of the woods, their white robes disappearing into the shadows like ghosts. The silence they leave behind is heavy with the weight of the supernatural. It's a bizarre intersection of the practical and the mystical. You've seen the sweat of the forge and the grit of the training field, but the druids remind you that for the Celts, the invisible world was just as real as the one they could touch. They didn't see a contradiction between a well-grist axle and a blessed one. Both were necessary for the wheel to turn correctly. You find yourself wondering if their curses actually worked, perhaps not through magic, but through the sheer power of suggestion. If a Roman soldier believes he has been cursed by a man who can speak to the gods, his hand is going to shake when he levels his pilum. The warriors are now noticeably more somber, their earlier bravado replaced by a quiet, focused intensity. The presence of the druids has reminded them of the stakes. They aren't just fighting for land or gold. They are part of a cosmic struggle defined by the old ways. You see a champion adjusting his helmet, his eyes fixed on the horizon where the sun is starting to dip. The blessing has been given. The horses are quiet, as if they too sensed the shift in the air. As the druids vanish completely, the camp begins to pack up with a new, eerie efficiency. There is no more shouting, no more boasting. The sovereignty of the wheel is now in the hands of the drivers and the fighters. You take a final look at the ochre mark on the lead chariot, the red pigment standing out against the pale ash wood. It's a reminder that in the forgotten archives, the most powerful components are often the ones you can't see. You follow the silent line of war cars as they move out of the meadow, headed toward the first real shadow of Rome. The deep, rhythmic silence of the forest is suddenly punctured by a sound that doesn't belong here. The synchronized metallic thump-clink of Roman sandals and larica hamata. You are crouched on a ridgeline looking down as the first Roman scouting party enters the valley. They are a wall of iron and red wool, moving with a geometric precision that feels alien to this wild landscape. This is the moment history has been holding its breath. Rome's first encounter with the Celtic Chariot. You watch the Roman centurion signal a halt. He's seen the ruts in the road, but he's never seen the things that made them. Suddenly, from the tree line opposite, the first wave of essedum bursts forth, not in a line, but in a chaotic, swirling cloud of speed and blue paint. Mainstream historical accounts, particularly from the early campaigns in Gaul, describe the Roman shock as almost total. The legions were the masters of professional war. They expected a foe to stand still, form a line, and die in an orderly fashion. Instead, The Celtic chariots refuse to engage. They scream past the Roman flanks, hurling heavy javelins that pierce through the rectangular scutum shields, and then vanish before a Roman pilum can even be leveled. To the legionary, who is weighed down by 40 pounds of kit, these chariots look like they are cheating. They aren't following the rules. You probably wouldn't survive this as a Roman. The sheer psychological whiplash of seeing a man run out onto a chariot pole while his driver performs a high-speed U-turn is enough to make any disciplined soldier doubt his training. There is a quirky, fringe tidbit about these early skirmishes. Some Roman veterans later claimed that the Celts used scythed wheels blades attached to the axles to mow down infantry like wheat, while mainstream archaeology has found almost no evidence of scythed chariots in Western Europe. That was more of a Persian thing. The myth of them was so pervasive in the Roman imagination that it suggests the fear they felt was almost hallucinatory. The rattling of the iron tires and the speed of the charge were so intense that the Romans hallucinated blades that weren't there. It's the ultimate tribute to the Celtic weaponization of terror. Historians still argue whether the Romans' initial failure to counter the chariot was due to a lack of light cavalry or a fundamental misunderstanding of Celtic terrain. You watch as a Roman maniple tries to box in a group of chariots. It's like trying to catch a swarm of hornets with a net. The chariots simply split, navigate a suicide slope that no horse should be able to descend, and reappear behind the Roman line. The Romans are fighting in 2 dimensions, but the Celts are playing in 3. You see the centurion's face tighten. He's realizing that his manual on how to conquer a continent is missing a very important chapter. You notice the tactical nuance of the harassment phase. The chariots aren't trying to break the Roman center knot yet. They are testing the edges. Every pass is a probe to see which centurion flinches, which line of shields has a gap, and how long it takes the Roman archers to find their range. It's a high-speed reconnaissance by fire. You see a warrior leap from his moving car, finish off a fallen Roman scout, and leap back onto the yoke as his driver circles. It's so fluid it looks rehearsed, a dance of death that makes the Roman rigidness look brittle. It's funny to think about the culture clash happening in this valley. On one side, you have the standardized man the Roman, whose gear is identical to the man next to him, who eats the same grain and who follows a written code. On the other, you have the individualist, the Celtic champion, whose gear is a unique masterpiece, who fights for personal glory and who follows a song. This first clash is the collision of 2 entirely different ways of being human. And right now, the song is winning. The Roman discipline is holding, but it's cracking at the seams as the sound of the carnix echoes off the valley walls. You find yourself holding your breath as a chariot drifts dangerously close to a line of Roman spears. The driver pulls a drift that kicks up a literal wall of dust, blinding the front rank of the legionaries. In that moment of blindness, the warrior on top hurls 2 spears in rapid succession, both finding a mark. By the time the dust clears, the chariot is already 100 yards away, the warrior laughing as he reaches for a fresh javelin. This is terror not as a concept, but as a lived experience. The Romans are realizing that civilization doesn't mean much when you're being hunted by blue-painted ghosts on wheels. The skirmish ends as quickly as it began. The Celtic chieftain gives a signal, a sharp, rising note from the carnix sand. The chariots melt back into the woods. They don't want a decisive battle yet. They want to bleed the Romans, to exhaust them, and to keep them awake all night wondering where the next rattle of iron will come from. The Romans are left standing in the clearing, their formation still perfect, but their nerves shattered. They begin the grim task of checking their wounded, their eyes constantly darting toward the tree line. As you watch from the ridge, you realize that the forgotten archives are full of these moments. The first time an empire realized it was invincible. The chariot was the tool that delivered that realization. You see the last of the chariots disappear into the green twilight, the blue patterns on the warrior's skin blending perfectly with the shadows. The Romans are starting to build a fortified camp, digging ditches and raising palisades. But you know that in this land, no wall is high enough to keep out the sound of the wheels. You follow the ghosts back into the deep woods, the first blood of the campaign staining the iron tires. The adrenaline of the skirmish begins to ebb as you follow the chariots back toward the heart of the tribe's territory, the hill fort. You've likely seen these from the ground as grassy ridges, but from the perspective of a chariot warrior, this is a massive tiered machine of logistics. You are approaching Maiden Castellor, a place much like a Tand. The scale of the earthworks is staggering. These aren't just hills, they are meticulously engineered defensive systems, with concentric ditches and ramparts that look like frozen waves of soil and timber. As the chariots slow to a rhythmic trot, navigating the labyrinthine entrance designed to break the momentum of any attacker, you see how these warriors maintain their high-tech edge. Mainstream archaeological research into hill forts has debunked the idea that these were just emergency shelters. They were bustling hubs of industry and storage. You watch as the chariots pull into a dedicated motor pool area near the granaries. Here, the logistics of the war car become apparent. Each chariot requires a constant supply of seasoned wood for repairs, fresh leather for the suspension floors, and a massive amount of high-quality fodder for the ponies. Historians still argue whether the hill forts served as central state armories or if each noble family was responsible for their own maintenance within the walls. Looking at the rows of specialized chariot sheds, it seems clear there was a communal effort to keep the tribe's mobile strike force at peak performance. There is a quirky, fringe detail regarding the maintenance of these chariots. Some excavations have found pits filled with thousands of uniformed egg-shaped river stones. While some believe these were just sling stones for defense, a more outside-the-box theory suggests they were used as a primitive tumbling system to polish bronze fittings, or even as heat retainers for steaming the wood during emergency repairs. You probably wouldn't survive the daily grind here, not because of the combat, but because of the sheer physical labor. Before the sun even sets, the warriors are out of their cars and working alongside the grooms to check every single spoke for stress fractures. This is the pit crew reality of the Iron Age. You notice the massive grain pits, some capable of holding a year's worth of food for the entire tribe. This surplus is what allows the heroic class to exist. If the farmers aren't producing more than they eat, the smith couant forge iron and the warrior couant spend his day running on a wooden pole. It's a delicate ecological balance. You see the women of the fort managing the distribution of these resources, their authority within the walls being absolute. In the forgotten archives, the hill fort is the battery that stores the energy the chariot releases on the battlefield. Without this stationary fortress, the mobile warrior would starve within a week. Historians still argue about the prestige versus practicality of these hill forts. Were the massive ramparts actually necessary for defense? Or were they just a way for a chieftain to say, "Look how many people I can make dig a ditch"? Watching the chariots zip through the narrow, high-walled gates, you realize it's both. The walls are psychological armor. They tell the Romans, we have the time, the people, and the willpower to reshape the earth itself. You see a blacksmith's apprentice running a whetstone over a spearhead. The sound of the metal on stone blending with the distant lowing of cattle brought inside for the night. It's funny to think about modern logistics supply chains stretching across oceans, digital inventory, just-in-time delivery. These Celts were doing it with wicker baskets and hand-dug pits. They knew exactly how many horses the local grazing could support and how much iron they could extract from the local bog. It was a perfectly circular economy. You watch a group of children lead the chariot ponies to a central well. The kids move with the same confidence as the warriors. Already learning the temperament of the animals, they will one day drive into history. The hill fort also serves as a giant acoustic chamber. The sounds of the camp, the ringing of the forge, the shouts of the trainers, the barking of the hounds are contained and amplified by the ramparts. It creates a sense of overwhelming presence. You find yourself looking up at the high timber palisades, realizing that this is a world where security is bought with sweat. The chariot isn't just a toy for the elite. It's the tip of a very large, very heavy spear that includes every man, woman, and child within these walls. As the evening fires are lit along the ramparts, the hill fort begins to glow like a crown of light on the landscape. You see the chariots now cleaned and covered with woolen tarps to protect the wood from the night dew. They look like sleeping predators. The terror of the day is being traded for the industry of the night. You take a breath of the air, which smells of wood smoke, damp earth, and horse, feeling the stability of the fortress beneath your feet. You realize that the forgotten archives aren't just about the moments of speed, they are about the endurance of the community. The chariot can only fly because the hill fort stands firm. You follow a group of weary warriors toward the communal longhouse, the stars beginning to prick through the indigo sky above the ramparts. Tomorrow, the cycle begins again: the forge, the field, and the fire. But for now, the machines are silent, and the tribe breathes as one. As the morning light crests the ramparts of the hill fort, you witness a sight that would have left a Roman traditionalist sputtering in disbelief. A chariot pulls into the central assembly area, but the figure standing on the platform, adjusting a heavy bronze torque over a cloak of vivid crimson, is not a man. She is a noble woman of the tribe, her hair braided with gold wire and her eyes sharp with the cold intelligence of a commander. In this world, the women of the war car aren't just myths or supporting characters. They are the architects of strategy and the drivers of the tribe's destiny. You watch as she checks the tension of the reins with a practiced flick of her wrist. This isn't a ceremonial role. She is a master of the machine, and the warriors around her accord her the same heroic respect they would any champion. Mainstream historical records, from the startled accounts of Tacitus to the later legends of Queen Meb, confirm that Celtic society allowed for a level of female agency that was centuries ahead of the Mediterranean world. Women could own property, divorce their husbands, and, crucially, lead armies. You see her conferring with the lead charioteer, pointing out a weakness in the Roman flank they observed yesterday. She isn't just a fighter, she is the brain of the tactical unit. The chariot serves as her mobile command center, allowing her to traverse the battlefield at high speed to shore up a wavering line or exploit a gap in the enemy's formation. To a Roman soldier, seeing a woman leading a charge was a form of psychological warfare in itself, total subversion of the natural order they were fighting to impose. There is a quirky fringe debate among bioarchaeologists who have studied the skeletal remains from chariot burials. Some have found that several warrior graves originally assumed to be male, because of the presence of weapons and vehicles actually belonged to women. These women weren't just honorary warriors. Their bone density and muscle attachment points suggest they spent a lifetime training climbing, throwing, and bracing against the vibration of a moving chariot floor. You probably wouldn't survive a single training session with her. While you're still trying to figure out which side of the spear is the business end, she's already calculated the wind speed and the exact moment to release a javelin to hit a galloping target. Historians still argue whether these female leaders were the exception or the rule. Was it only the highborn queens who took to the field, or was there a broader tradition of women warriors among the tribes? Looking at the way the younger girls in the Hillfort watch, her mimicking her stance and practicing their grip on wooden daggers, it feels less like an anomaly and more like a standard career path for those with the grit to pursue it. The sovereignty of the tribe was often seen as a female spirit, and the woman on the chariot was the living embodiment of that protective, often violent energy. She is the mother, the judge, and the executioner, all standing on a twow-heeled engine of war. You notice her chariot is slightly different, more ornate, with red enamel eyes on the hubcaps that seem to follow you as the wheels turn. It's a reminder that, in the forgotten archives, gender isn't the primary divider. Status is, if you have the lineage, the skill, and the wealth to maintain a chariot team. The tribe will follow you into the mouth of a Roman legion, regardless of your chromosomes. You see her signal to her driver, a man who looks like he's seen 100 winters, and they begin a series of high-speed figure eights in the dust. The synchronization between them is flawless. She doesn't need to speak. A shift in her weight tells him exactly when to accelerate. It's a funny thought, the Roman generals writing home about the barbarity of women in combat, while their own wives were legally treated as perpetual minors. The Celts understood something the civilized world had forgotten. Speed and terror do uncare who is holding the reins. You find yourself fascinated by the intricate chainmail she wears, a garment that would have cost as much as a small farm. It's tailored to her frame, allowing for the full range of motion needed to perform the tactical leap or to hurl a spear while the world is a blur of green and iron. As she prepares to lead a scouting party out of the gates, she stops to speak to an elder. There is no bowing, no subservience. It is a conversation between equals. You realize that the chariot is a great equalizer. On that leather mesh floor, under the scream of the carnix, the only thing that matters is your ability to stay upright and keep your head. You see her pull on her helmet, a bronze masterpiece topped with a stylized bird of prey, and suddenly she is no longer a person. She is a force of nature. The sun is now high, reflecting off the polished bronze of her chariot. The women of the war car represent the ultimate defiance of the Roman project. They are the proof that the Celtic world was a complex, multifaceted society that didn't fit into the neat boxes of civilization versus savagery. You follow the dust of her departure. the rhythmic jingle chime of her horse bells, fading as she leads her team back into the green twilight of the forest. The forgotten archives are finally starting to reveal their true depth. It's not just a story of men and metal, it's a story of a people who refuse to let their roles be defined by anyone but themselves. You take a moment to look at the empty space where her chariot stood, the ruts in the dirt, a silent testament to her authority. Tomorrow, you'll see how this leadership translates to the most dangerous tactic in the Celtic playbook, the hitandron. But for now, you carry the image of the crimson-cloaked queen with you as you head back toward the heart of the fort. You are back in the green-black shadows of the forest, but the pace has changed. This isn't a march, it's a predatory glide. You are participating in the art of the hitandron, the tactical bread and butter of the Celtic Chariot Corps. The goal today isn't to hold ground-holding. Ground is for people who like to die in ditches. Your goal is to turn the Roman sense of security into a jagged fragment of glass. You feel the chariot beneath you twitch as the driver navigates a narrow game trail, the iron tires biting into the mulch with a muted thrum. To your left and right, other chariots move in a staggered line, perfectly spaced so that they can fan out at a moment's notice without entangling their axles. Mainstream historical military analysis identifies this as disymmetric warfare. The Celts understood that they couldn't win a sustained, chest-to-chest grinding match with a Roman legion that would be like trying to headbutt a mountain. Instead, they weaponized the interstitial moments of the Roman day. You watch as the scouting party waits for the Romans to begin the grueling process of crossing a river. The legionaries are vulnerable. Their shields are overlapping poorly, and their heavy kits are damp. This is the hit. On a silent signula, simple hand gesture from the crimson-cloaked queen, chariots burst from the tree line. There is no long, dramatic charge. There is only a sudden, violent surge of speed. You hurl a javelin into the mass of red tunics here, the chaotic shout of the Roman centurions. Trying to restore order, and then before the first Roman pilum can even leave a soldier's hand, your driver has already initiated a wide, sweeping turn. This is the run. You are back in the trees before the Romans have even fully realized they are under attack. Historians still argue whether this constant flea-bite strategy was more effective at causing physical casualties or psychological erosion. One thing is certain: a soldier who has slept because he is expecting a chariot to burst through his tent at 3 a.m. is a soldier who is already half defeated. There is a quirky fringe tidbit about the stealth of these chariots. Some experimental archaeologists have suggested that the Celts wrapped the wooden joints of their chariots in wet rawhide, that, when dried, acted as a silent gasket, preventing the wood from creaking, while the iron tires were always loud on stone on the soft forest floor. A well-maintained Celtic chariot could move with a ghostly quietness. You probably wouldn't survive as a sentry in this world. You'd be staring into the dark, listening for a hoofbeat, only to realize the rustle you heard wasn't the wind, but the sound of 300 pounds of ash and iron moving at a sprint behind you. You notice the warriors aren't carrying heavy armor for these raids. They've stripped down to their tunics and woad, prioritizing agility over protection. If you're fast enough, you don't need a breastplate. You watch a warrior next to you, standing on the very edge of the chariot rail, mocking the Romans with a rhythmic chant as you retreat. It's a deliberate goading, an attempt to break their discipline and lure them into a disorganized pursuit into the deep woods. It's a game of cat and mouse where the mouse has teeth made of iron. It's funny too. Think about modern special forces and their emphasis on mobility and surprise. We think we invented the concept of the technicals, those pickup trucks with machine guns mounted in the back, but the Celtic chariot was the original technical. It provided a stable, mobile firing platform that could cross terrain a horse alone would struggle with. You see the drivers using micro-terrain slight depressions in the ground or small clumps of gorstu hide the chariot's silhouette during the approach. This isn't just luck. It's an advanced understanding of line of sight and camouflage. Historians still argue about the fatigue factor of this style of fighting. How long could the ponies maintain this level of stop-and-start exertion? You notice that the tribe has a relay system, as one group of chariots retreats to the forest to rest and water their horses. A fresh cell of warriors moves in to take their place. The pressure on the Romans is constant, a rhythmic pounding that never allows them to set a perimeter or find a rhythm of their own. It's a masterclass in operational tempo. As the sun begins to set, The Romans are forced to dig in early, their progress for the day measured in mere miles rather than leagues. They are exhausted, their eyes redrimmed from scanning the brush. You, however, are back at a hidden camp, the horses being rubbed down with dry grass and the warriors laughing as they recount the day's best hits. There is no sense of war as a burden here. It is a high-speed adventure, a test of skill that reinforces their social status with every successful javelin throw. The forgotten archives show us that the Celtic chariot wasn't just a vehicle, it was a philosophy of movement. It rejected the idea of a front line in favor of a front everywhere. You take a seat by a small shielded fire, the smell of wood smoke and horse sweat once again filling your senses. You realize that the Romans aren't just fighting an army, they are fighting a landscape that has learned how to move at 40 miles per hour. You close your eyes, the rhythmic clatter-clack of the day's run still echoing in your ears, knowing that tonight, the Romans will be the ones who don't sleep. The frantic energy of the Hitandran raids eventually gives way to a deeper, more somber ritual that reminds you these warriors are more than just tactical masters. They are a deeply spiritual people. You follow a small procession of charioteers and druids away from the noise of the camp toward a secluded Blackwater lake rimmed with ancient gnarled willows. Here, you witness the ritual hordes, a practice that seems entirely counterintuitive to your modern, practical mind. You see a warrior take a perfectly functional iron sword, lean it against a stone, and strike it with a heavy hammer until it is bent into a useless U shape. Beside him, a smith is dismantling a chariot, not for repair, but for destruction. They are killing the objects, breaking the axles, and snapping the spokes before tossing them into the dark waters of the lake. Mainstream archaeology has found hundreds of these sites across Europe, from Lyn Serig Bach in Anglesey to the massive deposits in Lake Neuchatel. These aren't just lost items, they were deliberately destroyed and offered to the gods of the underworld. You watch as a beautifully crafted bronze linchpin, shaped like a snarling wolf, is thrown into the center of the lake. To the Celts, an object of great power, especially one used in battle, possessed a soul of its own. When a warrior died, or when a great victory was won, the spirit of the weapon had to be released so it could serve in the other world. It's a literal retirement of the technology. You probably wouldn't survive the emotional weight of this. To see a Ferrer-level piece of engineering deliberately trashed as a thank you note to a deity is a level of commitment that makes our modern consumerism look shallow. There is a quirky fringe theory that these ritual deposits were actually a form of economic stabilization. By removing a significant amount of equality, iron and bronze, from circulation, the Druids could prevent inflation and keep the value of metal, and thus the status of the warrior class, artificially high. While most historians prefer the spiritual explanation, when you see the sheer volume of wealth being sunk into the mud, you realize it serves both ends. It's a sacred recycling program where the material goes back to the earth. Historians still argue whether the broken nature of the objects was to prevent them from being stolen by grave robbers, or to ensure they were dead enough to cross over into the realm of the spirits. You notice the warriors' faces are devoid of the aggression you saw on the battlefield. Here, they are humble. A champion kneels by the water's edge, whispering a prayer to the Lady of the Lake, or a local river god, thanking them for the speed of his wheels and the strength of his horses. The chariot isn't just a tool to him, it's a gift from the divine, and returning it to the water is a way of closing the circle. You see him drop a handful of blue woad powder into the water, watching it bloom like a bruise in the dark current. It's a sensorivy ritual, the smell of damp peat and the metallic clink of broken bronze creating an atmosphere of heavy, ancient magic. It's funny to think about our own relationship with technology. We trade in our phones the moment a new one comes out, and our old cars end up in a scrapyard without a second thought. But for the Celts, the end of a chariot's life was a funeral. They didn't just discard things, they transitioned them. You watch as an apprentice carefully places a set of iron tires into the silt, ensuring they are laid out in a specific geometric pattern. This attention to detail, even when the object is meant to be buried forever, shows a society that valued the process of creation and destruction as much as the utility of the item itself. The forgotten archives are literally paved with these offerings. Much of what we know about Celtic chariot design comes from these underwater graveyards, where the lack of oxygen in the peat has preserved the wood and leather for 2,000 years. Without the superstitious wastefulness of these warriors, the archives would be empty. You realize that their irrational behavior is the only reason you're standing here today, learning about the tension of their wheels and the curve of their yokes. They were unknowingly writing a letter to the future in the form of broken iron. As the last piece of a shattered axle disappears beneath the surface, a heavy silence falls over the group. The druid raises his arms, a final blessing that seems to make the very mist on the Lake Shiva. You feel a strange sense of loss, watching such craftsmanship be consigned to the mud. But the warriors don't seem sad. They look relieved. They have paid their debt to the land that provides the iron and the ashwood. They have ensured that their next chariot will be just as fast and just as lucky. You notice the sun is setting, casting a long blood-red reflection across the water. The ritual is over. The warriors turn and begin the walk back to the Hilford, their steps light and unburdened. They are ready to start again, to build new wheels and forge new blades. This cycle of create, use, sacrifice is the heartbeat of their culture. It keeps them connected to the earth and prevents them from becoming the rigid, unfeeling machine that they see in the Roman legions. As you follow them away from the lake, you take one last look back. The water is still now, the ripples from the offerings having vanished. Beneath that dark surface lies a treasure house of speed and terror, a silent army of killed chariots waiting for an archaeologist to wake them up. You realize that the terror of the Celtic warrior came from this absolute certainty in the spirit world. A man who believes his sword has a soul is a man who will never truly be alone on the battlefield. You step back into the forest, the smell of wet earth lingering in your nostrils like a promise. As you emerge from the somber silence of the lake ritual, you return to the preparation grounds where the warriors are readying themselves for a full-scale engagement. You are no longer looking at the strip-down raiders of the forest, you are looking at the armor of the elite. A champion stands before his chariot, and you see him being helped into a garment that is arguably the Celts' greatest gift to the history of protection: chainmail. You reach out to touch the cold metal. Feeling the thousands of interlocking iron rings each, one painstakingly hand-forged and riveted shut. This isn't the heavy, solid breastplate of a Greek hoplite that restricts breathing and movement. This is fluid armor. It moves with the warrior's body, flowing like water as he mounts the chariot. Yet it is capable of turning the edge of a Roman gladius. Mainstream history acknowledges that the Celts were likely the inventors of mail armor, the larica hamata, a technology so effective that the Romans immediately stole the design and used it for the next 6 centuries. You watch the warrior cinch a wide leather belt around his waist to distribute the weight of the mail, about 25 pounds of iron. So, this is the ultimate flex of the heroic age. Mail was incredibly labor-intensive to produce. A single shirt could take a smith months to complete. When you see a line of chariot warriors shimmering in the morning sun, you aren't just looking at soldiers, you're looking at a mobile fortune. You probably wouldn't survive the next train of wearing this all day, let alone trying to balance on a moving pole while wearing what is essentially a heavy iron sweater. There is a quirky fringe tidbit about the sound of the elite. Because the mail is made of loose rings, it creates a distinctive, metallic shimmering sound with every movement. When 100 mail-clad warriors mount their chariots, the sound of the iron tires is joined by a rhythmic, silver-clinking chorus. Historians still argue whether this was an intentional psychological addition to the wall of noise we discussed earlier. Imagine the sensory assault, the roar of the carnix, the rattle of the wheels, and the shimmering hiss of 1,000 iron shirts. It's a high-fidelity soundtrack to an upcoming disaster. You notice the warrior's helmet, a bronze masterpiece topped with a crest of horsehair and checkered with red enamel. It has hinged cheekpieces that protect the face without blocking the peripheral vision. Crucial feature for a man who needs to see a spear coming from his side at 40 miles per hour. This isn't mass-produced gear. Every scratch on the bronze tells a story of a duel won or a close call survived. You see a veteran running a thumb over a deep gouge in his helmet, a small smile playing on his lips. This is his archive of survival. Historians still argue about how much common infantry actually wore. While the chariot-riding elite were walking tanks, the supporting tribesmen might have only a shield and a spear. This creates a massive visual and tactical gap on the battlefield. The chariot warriors are the super heavy cavalry of their day, yet they possess the speed of a light scout. It's a combination that breaks the standard rock precursors' logic of ancient warfare. You see the warrior pick up his shield knot, a rectangular Roman door. but a long, elegant oval made of laminated wood and topped with a vertical iron spine. It's light, designed for active parrying rather than just hiding behind. It's a funny thought comparing this to modern body armor. We use Kevlar and ceramic plates, trying to hide our soldiers behind layers of tech. The Celts used their armor as a mirror. They wanted you to see the sun reflecting off their mail. They wanted you to know exactly how much wealth and power was hurtling toward you. The armor wasn't just for protection, it was for advertising. It signaled that the man in the chariot was someone who could afford the very best, and therefore someone who had likely spent his entire life learning how to kill people like you. The warrior finally takes up his spears-long heavy lance types for the initial pass and shorter, lighter javelins for the skirmish. He looks invincible, but you know the secret. All this iron and bronze makes the chariot heavier. The driver has to compensate for the added weight of the mail-clad noble, adjusting the tension of the leather floor and checking the horse's stamina. It's a trade-off between survivability and maneuverability. You see the driver pat the neck of the lead pony, perhaps apologizing for the extra burden they're about to pull. The sun is at its zenith now, turning the assembly area into a field of flashing light. The elite are ready. They have the engineering, the speed, the divine blessing, and now the iron skin to match their iron wheels. You find yourself caught up in the spectacle, the sheer gravity of their presence pulling you in. They aren't just warriors. They are the pinnacle of a metal-working civilization that has spent 1,000 years perfecting the art of the fight. As the chariots begin to move out in a grand procession, the shimmer of the mail creates a hypnotic effect. You follow them toward the edge of the plateau, where the valley opens up into a vast, green theater. This is where the continental dream of the chariot begins to fade. But before it goes, it's going to put on one hell of a show. You take a breath, the metallic scent of the mail and the hot horsehair filling your lungs, and prepare for the transition into the twilight of the Gallic war car. The grand, shimmering procession of mail-clad nobles eventually reaches the rolling plains of central Gaul. But here, you notice a subtle, chilling shift in the wind. The vast open spaces that should be the perfect playground for the chariot are instead being dominated by something new. You see a group of young warrior sons of the very men we've been following, practicing their maneuvers. But they aren't standing on the leather mesh floor of an essedum. They are mounted directly onto the backs of large, powerful horses, ancestors of the heavy cavalry that would one day define the Middle Ages. This is the decline of the continental chariot, a slow-motion technological sunset where the chariot is being relegated to a ceremonial relic of the old ways. Mainstream history notes that by the mid-1st century BC, the chariot had almost entirely vanished from the battlefields of mainland Europe. The tribes of Gaul had begun to prioritize heavy cavalry, influenced by their contact with the Germans to the east and the Romans to the south. You watch as a veteran chieftain looks on with a mixture of pride and melancholy. To him, the chariot represents the heroic age of duels and status. To his son, the horse is a more efficient, less temperamental way to deliver a sword blow. You probably would unsurvive the transition riding bareback, or with a primitive, four-horned saddle, while swinging a heavy longsword requires a different set of muscles than the chariot leg you've been developing. There is a quirky fringe theory that the death of the continental chariot was actually caused by a change in the European climate. Some environmental historians suggest that a period of increased rainfall turned much of the Gallic plains into a seasonal quagmire, making the high-speed iron tires a liability. While the lightweight chariots were built for mud, they couldn't compete with the sheer push of a heavy cavalry charge in deep slush. Historians still argue whether the change was purely tactical or if it was a cultural shift toward a more Romanized way of thinking about warfare. Looking at the younger warriors, they seem less interested in the dance of the Polaroon and more interested in the brutal efficiency of the charge. You notice that the chariots still in use on the continent are becoming more ornate and less functional. They are used to transport the chieftain to the parley, but when the spears start flying, the leader hops onto a horse. The chariot has become a status symbol, in the most literal sense, a mobile throne rather than a weapon. You see a beautiful chariot being used to carry a druid's ritual gear. Its iron tires are thin, and its frame is draped in heavy silks that would catch in the wind during a real charge. It's a sad sight, like seeing a retired racehorse pulling a tourist carriage. It's a funny thought, comparing this to the death of the manual transmission in modern cars. We know the automatic is more efficient, but we miss the feel of the gear. For the Celts, the chariot was the manual way of war. It required more skill, more coordination, and a deeper bond with the driver. The mounted cavalryman is a solo act. He doesn't need a partner. He doesn't need a pit crew to check his axles. He just needs a horse and a steady hand. You see the drivers, those elite specialists we admired, looking on with crossed arms, realizing their profession is becoming a niche skill for the elderly. You find yourself standing near one of the last true war chariots of Gaul. The driver is meticulously greasing the axle, even though he knows they won't be leading the vanguard today. There's a stubborn dignity in his movements. He's a keeper of a dying archive. He tells you stories of the great days when the rattle of wheels was the only sound a Roman knew to fear. Now, Romans have learned how to counter the chariot with light-armed velites who can dart between the wheels and hamstring the horses. The technology has been solved by the enemy, and the tribes are forced to adapt or be erased. As the sun sets over the Gallic horizon, the silhouette of the mounted horseman dominates the skyline. The forgotten archives of the mainland are being closed, one broken wheel at a time. But as you look toward the north, across the gray, churning waters of the Channel, you remember that there is one place where the old ways still hold out. The British Isles remain a sanctuary for the wheel and the pole. While Gaul embraces the horse, Britain is doubling down on the chariot, refining it into its final, most lethal form. You take a final look at the Gallic camp, where the smell of horse stable and iron remains. But the clatter-clack of the wheels is being replaced by the heavy, rhythmic thumping of cavalry hooves. The world is moving on. You feel a pull toward the coast, a desire to follow the ghosts of the chariot to their final stronghold. You step away from the dying fire of the continent, the indigo paint on your skin feeling like a badge of a lost cause. Tomorrow, you will cross the water to a land where the chariot is still king, and where a queen named Boudica is waiting to show Rome that the old ways still have plenty of bite. You take a breath of the salt air, the transition from the Gallic plains to the British cliffs beginning in your mind. The archives aren't finished yet. They're just moving to a different shelf. You leave the fading echoes of Gaul behind, crossing the gray, volatile expanse of the English Channel. As the white cliffs of Dover rise out of the spray like the teeth of a giant, you realize you haven't just traveled across water, you've traveled back in time. While the continental Celts have traded their chariots for the modern convenience of heavy cavalry. The tribes of Britain have turned their island into a sanctuary for the wheel and the pole. Here, the chariot didn't just survive, it evolved. The British Island Sanctuary is a place where the landscape broken by ancient forests, steep chalk hills, and treacherous fens demands the agility that only a twow-heeled engine of war can provide. You step onto the shingle beach, and immediately, the familiar clack-clack of iron on flint greets you like a heartbeat. Mainstream history, largely through the frustrated reports of Julius Caesar during his invasions of 55 and 54 BC, confirms that the British chariots were a tactical shock to the Roman system. Caesar noted that while the Gauls had largely abandoned the practice, the Britons had thousands of chariots at their disposal, over 4,000 in the service of the king Cassivellaunus alone. To the Romans, it was like landing in a museum that had suddenly decided to kill them. You watch as a British chariot team navigates the steep, slippery slopes of a coastal hillfort. They move with a reckless confidence, the drivers using a specialized long-rein technique that allows them to control the horses, even when standing. At the very back of the cab to balance the weight, there is a quirky fringe tidbit about these British war cars. Some archaeologists have noted that the British designs were even lighter than their continental cousins, often utilizing bentwood techniques that favored willow and birch over the heavier oak used in Gaul. This made them amphibious in a sense. There are accounts of British warriors driving their chariots directly into the surf to harass the Roman legionaries as they tried to disembark from their ships. You probably would unsurvive the sea wash, charged trying to keep your footing on a wet leather mesh floor, while a wave hits the axle, and a Roman soldier tries to pull you down with a boat hook is a recipe for a very salty end. Historians still argue whether the British obsession with the chariot was a sign of cultural isolation or a deliberate choice based on their unique geography. In a land without the sprawling, flat plains of the continent, the chariot remained the most efficient way to move a nobleman quickly across broken terrain. You see a group of British warriors practicing a cliffside maneuver, where they feign a retreat toward a steep dropover, only for the chariots to whip around in a space no wider than a footpath. leaving the pursuing Roman scouts to choose between a long fall or a face full of javelins. It's a specialized, high-altitude style of combat that the professional legions were never trained for. You notice the British chariots have a more aggressive look. The bronze fittings are often inlaid with red glass and dragon scale patterns that seem to shimmer as the vehicle moves. The warriors themselves are more heavily tattooed than their Gallic cousins, their woad patterns spiraling down their legs and onto their very toes. In this sanctuary, the heroic code is still the supreme law. You watch as a young British chieftain challenges a rival to a race along the ridgeway, not just for sport, but to settle a dispute over grazing rights. The chariot is the judge, the jury, and the witness. It's a funny thought, realizing that while Rome was building marble temples and writing epic poetry, Britain was perfecting the art of the high-speed drift on a chalk hillside. They weren't behind the times, they were living in a different timeline altogether. You see the British smiths working with a type of iron that is incredibly high in phosphorus, making it cold, short, and brittle, but capable of taking a wicked glass harp edge. They are specialists in a world that the rest of the empire has forgotten. You find yourself feeling a strange sense of loyalty to these islanders. They are the holdouts, the keepers of the flame. You notice the Druids here have an even more dominant presence. In the British sanctuary, the connection between the wheels and the gods is absolute. You see a Druid marking the path of the sun with a chariot wheel, using the spokes to calculate the timing of the next harvest. The machine is a compass, a calendar, and a weapon. You realize that, to conquer Britain, Rome won't just have to fight an army. They'll have to fight a belief system that is literally mounted on axles, as the sun sets over the rolling green hills of the interior. The chariots are parked in a circle around a massive, glowing fire. The sound of the sea is a constant backdrop to the chiming of the horse bells. You take a breath of the damp, salty air, feeling the island spirit settle into your bones. The continent may have moved on to the heavy thud of the cavalry, but here in the mist, the rattle of the wheel is still the sound of freedom. You follow the warriors toward the longhouse, the indigo paint on your skin itching in the humid air, knowing that the real test of the British sanctuary is coming. The Romans are building their ships. They are sharpening their swords, but the chariots are waiting. And in the heart of the island, a fire is being lit that will eventually burn the very heart of the Roman occupation. You close your eyes, the rhythmic sound of the waves blending with the imaginary rattle of 10,000 wheels, ready for the storm that is about to break. The sanctuary of the island is suddenly choked with the acrid smell of burning thatch and the copper temps of blood. You are no longer in a world of ritualized duels. You are in the middle of a total war. It is a D60, and you are standing in the bed of a chariot at the head of a column that stretches as far as the eye can see. Beside you, standing tall in a war car that seems to pulse with the collective rage of 1,000 years, is Boudica. She is not just a queen, she is a titan of vengeance. Her hair is a tawny mane that falls to her waist, her voice a harsh rasp that carries over the rhythmic thump of spears against shields. This is the Great Uprising. The moment the British chariot weaponized the very concept of the end. Mainstream history records the devastation of Boudica's revolt with genuine horror. 3 major Roman centers, Camulodunum, Verulamium, and London, are being reduced to layers of ash so thick that modern archaeologists can still find the Boudican destruction layer in the soil of London today. You watch as the chariots lead the charge into the heart of the Roman colony. This isn't the Hitandron of the woods. This is a steamroller of wood and iron. The chariots act as the breakthrough force, their iron tires crushing the neatly paved Roman streets, scattering the terrified civilians and the few panicked soldiers left behind. You probably wouldn't survive the heat. The fires are so intense, they are melting the Roman bronze coins into puddles. There is a quirky fringe tidbit about Boudica's chariots. Some ancient accounts suggest she had holy birds, specifically hares, or chickens released from the folds of her dress to observe their flight patterns before a charge. While that sounds like folklore, you see her driver pause to watch a hawk circle the burning Forum of London before he snaps the reins. To the Britons, the chariot was the chariot of the gods, and they believed they were literally driving through the Roman world with the spirits of their ancestors as passengers. Historians still argue whether the scythe chariots, often attributed to Boudica by later Victorian artists, actually existed. Most modern evidence says no, but when you see the way the iron-shod wheels catch the light as they spin through the ruins, they don't need blades to look lethal. Historians still argue about the sheer size of the chariot force, Boudica commanded. Some Roman sources claim 250,000 people followed her, with the chariots forming a mobile elite that could strike anywhere at a moment's notice. You notice the tactical shift here. The chariots are being used to herd the Romans. They aren't just killing, they are driving the enemy into bottlenecks where the massive infantry follow-up can finish the job. It is a terrifying display of coordinated chaos. You see a Roman veteran try to stand his ground, his pylon leveled, only to be bypassed by 3 chariots at once, their dust blinding him before the spears find their mark. You notice that even in the middle of a burning city, the heroic style persists. A warrior leaps from his moving chariot to loot a Roman villa, snatching a silver platter or a bronze statuette before vaulting back into the cab as it drifts around a corner. It's a mixture of a liberation movement and a high-speed heist. It's funny to think about the Roman administrators who thought they had civilized this island, now watching their marble bathhouses being used as targets for javelin practice. The forgotten archives are being rewritten in smoke and fire. The atmosphere is one of frantic, apocalyptic joy. The tribes believe they have won. They have burnt the heart out of the occupation. But you, with the benefit of hindsight, can see the shadow growing on the horizon. The Roman governor Suetonius Paulinus is returning from the north with the battle-hardened 14th Legion. He isn't bringing civilians, he's bringing the professional soldiers who know exactly how to handle a chariot. You see Boudica looking toward the north, her face a mask of blue paint and soot, her eyes never losing that cold, burning light. She knows the real test hasn't even begun. As the sun sets over the ruins of London, the sky matches the red of the burning buildings. The chariots are parked among the rubble, their horses drinking from public fountains. There is a sense of mission accomplished in the air, but the silence of the surrounding countryside is heavy. You take a breath, the taste of charcoal and ash on your tongue, feeling the vibration of the earth as the Roman legions march south. The terror has reached its peak, but the speed is about to meet a wall of iron that doesn't flinch. You follow Boudica as she walks among her warriors, touching the wheels of their chariots and whispering words of encouragement. She is the mother of the revolt, and tonight, she is the most powerful person in Britain. You find a spot near a cooling stone wall, the indigo patterns on your skin hidden by the dark. You realize that the forgotten archives are about to record a tragedy. But for this one night, the wheel is king, and Rome is nothing more than a memory of smoke. The triumphant glow of London's embers fades into the gray, oppressive light of a Midlands morning. You are standing in the bed of a chariot on the edge of a narrow valley, and the atmosphere has shifted from the frantic joy of the uprising to a heavy, suffocating dread. Across the field, the Roman governor Suetonius Paulinus has chosen his ground with the cold, mathematical precision of a master architect. He has backed his legions against a dense forest, protecting his rear, and narrowed the battlefield so that the British numbers, the tens of thousands of warriors and their chariots, are squeezed into a bottleneck. This is the siege of Elysius Ghost, a tactical trap where the lack of unity among the tribes and their own overconfidence begin to turn the chariot from a weapon into a cage. Mainstream history calls this the Battle of Watling Street, and it remains one of the most lopsided military disasters in the ancient world. You watch as the British chariots, once the masters of the Hitandrun, find themselves with nowhere to run. The Romans have formed a wedge of shields and spears, a solid wall of iron that refuses to break. It's when the chariots charge, they aren't hitting a disorganized mob, they are hitting a machine. The javelins that once tore through Roman scouting parties are now being caught on a forest of overlapping scuta. You probably wouldn't survive the impact when a chariot traveling at full speed hits a stationary, prized line of heavy infantry. The laws of physics are very, very unkind to the passengers. There is a quirky fringe debate about the baggage train that ultimately doomed the Britons. Some archaeological surveys suggest that the tribes were so certain of victory that they brought their entire families in wagons, parked in a massive semicircle behind the battle line to watch the show. When the Roman countercharge began, these wagons became a deadly blockade. The chariots, trying to retreat and regroup, found themselves pinned between the Roman spears and their own families' carts. Historians still argue whether this was a tactical blunder or a ritualized alien gamble that simply failed. As you see a driver frantically trying to turn his team in the cramped space, only for his wheels to lock with a neighboring vehicle, you realize that speed is useless if you have no room to move. Historians still argue about the fate of Boudica herself in these final moments. Some say she took poison. Others suggest she fell in the chaos. Standing there, you see the professional soldier finally take his revenge. The Roman legionaries aren't chasing the chariots. They are simply advancing, step by rhythmic step, pushing the Britons back into their own barricades. You see a warrior perform a desperate tactical leap, trying to clear a path, but he is met not with terror, but with a dozen short swords. The heroic age is being ground into the dirt by a system that values the unit over the individual. You notice a strange silence beginning to fall over the British side, even amidst the screaming. It's the silence of realization. The chariots, the pride of the island, are being shattered. You see an iron tire snap off an axle, the wood splintering like dry bone. It's a funny, tragic thought. The very engineering that made them fast is what makes them fragile in a grinding, stationary brawl. You see the crimson-cloaked queen one last time, her chariot stalled against a wagon wheel, her face a mask of ash. She isn't looking at the Romans, she's looking at the sky, as if asking the Druids where the spirit paths went. It's a brutal contrast to the art of the hitandron. This is the science of the slaughter. The Romans have turned the terrain against the masters of terrain. You find yourself ducking as a volley of Roman pilethos, heavy armor-piercing javelin zarines down on the chariot line. The thin wooden rails of the essedum offer no protection against such weight. The forgotten archives are recording the death of an era in the sound of breaking ash and the screams of horses. You realize that the Roman victory wasn't just about better swords, it was about better discipline and the ability to say no to the chaos that the chariot represented. As the sun begins to dip, the Roman wedge breaks through the center. The terror has changed sides. You see the warriors fleeing on foot, abandoning the vehicles that were once their mobile thrones. The chariots are left behind, hundreds of them, looking like a graveyard of wooden skeletons. You take a breath of the air, which is now thick with the smell of sweat, iron, and the finality of a lost cause. The sovereignty of the wheel has been broken by the Order of the Eagle. You follow the few survivors who managed to melt away into the woods, but the energy is gone. The British sanctuary has been breached. You look back at the valley where the Roman fires are being lit. They are burning the chariots. You can hear the wood popping in the heat, the iron tires falling into the ashes. It's the end of the dream of Boudica. But the technology itself, the genius of the Celtic wheels, about to find a strange new life in the hands of its conquerors. The fires of Watling Street have cooled into a bitter gray ash, and the sound of the carnix has been replaced by the rhythmic, heavy tread of the Roman occupation. But as you walk through a Roman cavalry camp near the new frontier, you notice something unexpected. The victors didn't just burn the culture, they looted the technology. You see a Roman decarina, commander of 30 horsemen, expecting a new shipment of gear. He isn't holding a Roman-style bit or a heavy Mediterranean saddle. He is holding a 4-horn saddle and a 3-link snaffle bit that are unmistakably Celtic in design. This is the Roman adoption of Celtic tech, a fascinating moment in the forgotten archives where the defeated warriors' innovations become the backbone of the empire's military expansion. Mainstream history confirms that Rome, for all its pride, was a civilization of magpies. They saw that their own cavalry was vastly inferior to the men they had just conquered, so they simply absorbed the Celtic expertise. You watch as a Roman blacksmith, likely working alongside a captured Celtic specialist, hammers out a set of iron horseshoes and harness, fittings that follow the exact metallurgical recipes of the tribes. The Romans even adopted the Celtic words for their vehicles. The Latin word carpentum, a 12-wheeled carriage, and rida, a 4-wheeled wagon, are both derived from Gaulish roots. You probably wouldn't survive the irony of this, standing in a Roman fort, watching a legionary use a barbarian harness to pull a cart full of stones for a Roman road. There is a quirky fringe detail about the Celtic-Roman hybrid units. Some archaeological finds in the northern forts suggest that Roman cavalrymen began wearing Celtic-style trousers, braca, and checkered cloaks because they were simply more practical for riding in the cold British rain than the traditional Roman tunic. Historians still argue whether this was a sign of going native or just cold-blooded pragmatism. You see a Roman soldier adjusting his cloak, which is fastened with a bronze brooch featuring the same swirling Latin patterns you saw in the Hilfert. The terror of the blue-painted warrior has been sterilized into a fashion statement and a tactical advantage. Historians still argue about how much the Romans actually improved the technology, while they added their own standardized manufacturing processes. The core physics of the Celtic wheel, the heat-shrunk tire, and the flexible axle remained unchanged because the Romans could find a better way to do it. You see a Roman transport unit moving a massive siege engine. The wagons they use are essentially upscaled Celtic chariots. The empire that invented professional soldiers realized that the professionals needed the tools of the amateurs to actually navigate the wild frontiers of the north. It's a funny thought, seeing the high-tech gear of the resistance being used to maintain the occupation. The chariot itself, however, undergoes a strange transformation. In the Roman world, it is no longer a weapon of the tactical leap or the hitandron. It is relegated to the triumph the grand parade through the streets of Rome, where a victorious general shows off his loot. You see a captured British chariot being loaded onto a ship, destined to be paraded in front of a crowd that has never seen a bog or a carnix. It has been stripped of its soul, turned into a curiosity for the civilized world to gawk at. You notice the Roman cavalry horses are also changing. They are being crossbred with the sturdy northern ponies you met earlier, creating a larger, more aggressive animal that combines Mediterranean height with Celtic endurance. It's a biological merger that mirrors the technological one. You watch a Roman rider put his horse through its paces. He's sitting in that four-horned saddle which clips his thighs in place and allows him to use both hands to wield a long Celtic-style spatha sword. He is a professional version of the hero you followed, minus the woad and the song. The forgotten archives show us that victory isn't always about erasure. Sometimes it's about assimilation. The Romans didn't just conquer the Celts, they wore them. They drove their wheels, used their bits, and sat in their saddles. You take a breath of the air which smells of Roman incense and Celtic horsewheat. Feeling the blurred lines between the two worlds, the terror of the chariot might be gone from the plains of the south, but the engineering is now part of the Roman machine, helping to hold the very borders that the chariots once tried to defend. As you look toward the north, where the mist still clings to the Scottish Highlands, you realize that the story isn't quite over. The Romans have the tech, but the tribes in the far north, the Caledonians, still have the spirit, and they are waiting for one final grand charge to show Rome that you can steal a man's wheel, but you can't steal his speed. You follow the Roman patrol as they move toward the frontier, the familiar clack-clack of the iron tires echoing against the newly paved stones of the Roman road. You are standing on a cold, wind-blasted slope in the shadow of the Scottish Highlands. It is AD 83, and the Roman Empire has reached its high-water mark. You are witnessing the last stand at Mons Graupius, the final great chariot charge of the ancient world. Below you, the Roman governor Agricola has arrayed his legions, their armor gleaming like a stagnant pool of silver in the pale northern sun. But above them, the Caledonian tribes have gathered in their thousands. They have seen the fall of Gaul and the burning of London, and they have decided that if the chariot is to go into the archives, it will go in a blaze of defiance. You hear it before you see it, the rhythmic, thunderous rattle of the essedum beginning their descent. Mainstream history, via the Roman historian Tacitus Agricola's Soni La, describes this as a moment of magnificent terror. The Caledonians didn't just have a few chariots, they had an entire corps that filled the middle of the plain, making a din as they galloped to and fro. You watch as the chariots perform their final, desperate dance. They aren't trying to outmaneuver the Romans anymore. They are trying to break them with pure kinetic energy. The drivers are pushing their ponies to the absolute limit, the iron tires screaming as they skip over the granite rocks of the hillside. You probably wouldn't have survived the descent. The pitch of the slope is so steep that the chariots are essentially falling with style. Their weight kept centered only by the incredible core strength of the warriors balancing on the tongues. There is a quirky fringe debate about the Galaglass spirit in this final battle. Some suggest the Caledonians used a specific suicide harness breakaway pin that allowed the horses to be released at the moment of impact, so the chariot would become a high-speed wooden missile. While this sounds like the plot of an Iron Age action movie, when you see a chariot hurtling toward a line of Roman auxiliary infantry, it feels entirely plausible. Historians still argue whether the Caledonian defeat was due to Agricola's superior use of Batavian and Tungrian infantry who fought with their elbows tucked in, making it impossible for the chariots to find a gap, or if the chariot had simply met its match in the professional evolution of Roman anti-cavalry tactics. You notice the warriors on the chariots are different from the ones you saw in Gaul. They are leaner, their woad patterns more jagged and aggressive, reflecting a landscape that is harder and more unforgiving. They are the end of the line. One warrior leaps from his car, lands in the middle of a Roman cohort, and takes down 2 men before being overwhelmed. It is a masterpiece of individual bravery and tactical futility. The Romans don't move, they don't break. They just absorb the impact and push forward. It's the science of the slaughter, one last time. You see the chariots trying to retreat back up the hill, but the ground is now slick with blood and the horses are spent. Historians still argue about the casualty counts. Tacitus claims 10,000 Caledonians died to only 360 Romans, but standing here, you see the true cost isn't in the numbers, it's in the silence that follows. As the last chariot is overturned and its driver run through, the age of the wheel in Britain effectively ends. The Romans win the battle, but as Tacitus famously wrote of his own people, they make a dessert and call it peace. You see the Roman soldiers walking among the wreckage of the chariots, breaking the axles and looting the bronze linchpins. The forgotten archives are being closed by the heavy hand of an empire that has no room for the unpredictable. It's a funny, hollow feeling watching the Romans celebrate. They've conquered the edge of the world, but they've destroyed the very thing that made it special. You see a Roman centurion pick up a broken carnix, trying to blow through it, but he can only produce a weak, discordant hiss. He doesn't have the breath of the tribes. He doesn't have the song. The terror has been replaced by administration. You find yourself looking at the shattered remains of a chariot wheel, the iron tire still hot to the touch. It's a relic now. As the Caledonians melt away into the safety of the even deeper mountains, the highlands where even Rome dared not go, they carry the memory of the charge with them. The chariot won't be used in battle again, but it will live on in the stories told around peat fires for the next 1,000 years. You take a final breath of the cold Scottish air, the smell of heather and wet iron lingering on your skin. The forgotten archives have reached their final chapter of blood and wood. You follow the ghosts of the defeated northward, away from the Roman fires. The professional soldier has won the day, but he will never understand the joy of the tactical leap or the soul of the heroic code. You realize that the terror of the chariot wasn't just in the damage it did, but in the freedom. It represented the freedom to move faster than the world was ready for. You step into the mist of the mountains, the rhythmic clack-clack of the wheels now nothing more than a memory echoing in the stones. You are standing in a quiet, climate-controlled room in a modern museum. The hum of the air conditioner, a stark contrast to the roar of the carnix that still rings in your mind. Before you, resting on a bed of dark sand under a spotlight, is a reconstructive assembly of the Wetwang Slack chariot. This is the echo in the soil, the final stop in our journey through the forgotten archives. You look at the iron tires, pitted by 2,000 years of chemistry in the Yorkshire earth, and the delicate bronze openwork of the harness fittings. They look fragile now, like the bones of an extinct bird, but you know better. You know the tension they once held, the speed they weaponized, and the terror they delivered to the doorstep of an empire. Mainstream archaeology has experienced a renaissance in the last few decades, using ground-penetrating radar and isotopic analysis to map the lives of these warriors. We now know that the blue paint was unjust. A myth remnants of woad have been found in the very soil of burial pits. You watch a conservator nearby meticulously cleaning a linchpin with a laser, revealing the swirling S patterns of the Latin style. It's a funny thought. Really, you spent your journey dodging spears and balancing on wooden poles, and now the closest you can get is a sheet of reinforced glass. But the archives are never truly silent. Every time a new chariot burial is unearthed, whether in a construction site in Leicestershire or a peat bog in France, the story of the Celtic warrior gains a new verse. There is a quirky fringe debate among experimental archaeologists who have built functional replicas of these vehicles. They found that the chariots are actually more stable at high speeds than at a slow trot. The centrifugal force of the heavy iron tires acts like a gyroscope, keeping the light frame pinned to the ground. This means the insane speed of the Celts was actually a safety feature. Historians still argue whether the decline of the chariot was truly a defeat, or if the technology simply transformed into the agricultural and transport wagons that built medieval Europe. You look at the hub of the wheel and realize it's the direct ancestor of the wheels that eventually carried the Renaissance and the Industrial Revolution. The terror died, but the engineering lived on in every wagon that rolled down a European road. Historians still argue about the identity of the people buried in these chariots. Recent DNA studies suggest they were far more cosmopolitan than we once thought, a mix of local lineages and travelers from across the continent, all bound by the shared culture of the wheel. You see a reconstruction of a warrior S-face based on a skull from the Garten Station burial. He looks surprisingly like someone you might pass on the street today, perhaps with a bit more intensity in the eyes. The barbarian label was always a matter of perspective, a Roman word for a people who simply valued different things, like the curve of an ash rim or the champion's portion of a feast. As you prepare to leave the museum, you take one last look at the iron tire. You'll remember the hiss of the steam in the forge, the smell of the woad in the camp, and the bone-shaking rattle of the charge at Mons Gropius. The Celtic Chariot warriors were the masters of a world that refused to be standardized. They weaponized speed, not just to kill, but to express their freedom. They were the original outliers, the high-performance specialists who forced the professional soldiers of Rome to change the way they saw the world. The lights in the museum begin to dim, and the city outside is settling into its own modern rhythm. The distant hum of traffic sounds a bit like the rattle of iron on stone if you listen closely enough. Your journey through the fog and the fire is over, but the archives remain open in the soil beneath your feet, and the stories that refuse to stay buried. You can rest now, knowing that the ghosts of the chariot have been heard once more. The iron is still, the ponies are at rest, and the heroic code is safely tucked away in the shadows of history. Take a slow, deep breath and feel the weight of the day lifting off your shoulders, replaced by the cool, quiet peace of the ancient past. The world has grown soft and still, the sharp edges of the spears and the jagged lines of the woad fading into a gentle, indigo blur that wraps around you like a heavy woolen cloak. There is no more thunder on the horizon, no more screaming of the bronze boar. There is only the rhythmic, steady pulse of time, flowing like a river toward the sea. The chariots are parked in the long grass of the other world, their wheels silent and their fires reduced to a warm, comforting glow that lights your way into a deep and dreamless sleep. Let the mist close in around you, soft and protective, as you drift away from the iron and the wood, back into the quiet sanctuary of the present moment, where everything is as it should be.